Oh my goodness. So, this is where these suckers came from. You see how much I gotta read? 3 and 9. So this is the novel. I should read this. The Man from Snowy. I remember one that was played a lot was The Man from Snowy River. I remember The Iron Giant. That was the one that I remember. Do I want to read this? It'll help me understand Swin and this was the novel? Oh my god. Do I want to spend time reading this? Alright, let's go. A single passenger ship of prodigious size laid anchor in a port town in the northeast of the Principality of Reverie. Ascribingly crafted into from top to bottom, a single glance was enough to discern its intended clientele. The privileged few among society upper crust, true to appearances. The passengers boarding the vessel that day most certainly fit the bill, each smartly dressed and adorned with conspicuous opulence. Even among such guests, however, two stood out. A young lady possessed a regal air, and the butler at her side. Judging from their dress, behavior, and linguistic register, they suited the setting to a prim and proper T. The single factor that set them apart from the other guests was their ages. Nadia looked to be much older than 12, or perhaps 13 years old, making them mere children in the eyes of most. Just one moment, my lady. The young butler labored to keep pace with the young lady as he dragged a large suitcase behind him. Despite this, she continued to stride forward, not slowing her pace in the slightest. Exhaustion seized his weary brow. His attire was proper, as befitting his station, but his unkempt hair, grown out long enough to completely obscure his eyes, was another story. On top of that, everything about his demeanor screamed that he was timid, weak in spirit. "Snap to it, you dullard!" the young lady brutishly shouted, now several paces ahead of the struggling boy. "If you can't make those legs move any faster, I'll cut them off and feed them to the hounds." She continued to increase her pace while assailing her butler with an unending string of contemptuous words. Her arrogant, haughty demeanor stood in stark contrast to her graceful appearance. Dressed in a lovely black frill dress, her blue eyes shone like a pair of sparkling sapphires, and her pigtails curled slightly in perfect arcs. Most eye-catching of all, however, was the 50 red stuffed bear she held close. Dang. So this is talking about freaking Nadia. The doll was large enough to draw attention and didn't look out of place in the arms of a girl such as her. "Ah, please, my lady, forgive me." In response to the girl's tirade, the boy miserably sputtered excuses and breathlessly pleaded for leniency as he summoned his remaining strength to pick up his pace. After a not insubstantial trip, the two finally arrived at the ship's boarding gate. "May I please see your invitation and boarding passes?" The crew member working the gate asked, smiling politely. Up close, the ship was even more opulent, a prized possession of the Byrne Company. Its main route was between Reverie and the Calvert Republic via Lamley Bay. For this particular trip, the entire ship has been reserved by one Hoblar Barn, a wealthy merchant from Calvert. Passengers hoping to board required both a standard boarding pass as well as an explicit invitation from Mr. Barn himself. However, as each invitation included the room information for the guests in question, the boarding pass was strictly a formality. Gray, the girl called the boy by name and gestured with her hand, implicitly ordering him to present the credentials. "Yes, my lady. What do you require of me?" The boy asked, having completely failed to grasp his employer's unspoken instructions. "You cannot possibly be this dense, you stupid worm," she snapped. "Oh, I am sorry, my lady. I beg your forgiveness." Cowering before the young lady's vicious glare, the boy stuttered and stammered 1,000 apologies. "Silence! The invitation and boarding pass now. Right away, my lady." The boy began busily rustling through the contents of the suitcase, randomly searching for the requisite papers. Yes, haste quickly proved to be his downfall, for no sooner had he located the pass than a sudden gust of wind blew past, tearing the paper from his hand. "Oh no," he exclaimed. The boy instinctively threw his arms out, stretching them to their physical limit, but his efforts were in vain. The boarding pass fluttered to the bottom of the harbor, coming to rest gently on the water's surface. As though that wasn't bad enough, misfortune continued to hound the boy as a number of silhouettes swiftly appeared beneath the waterlogged document. A school of fish Dang, it just keeps getting worse for this sucker. Spraying water all about. They then descended back into the harbor's depth, taking the hapless butler's boarding pass along with them. Ah, no! The boy's grief-stricken cry resonated through the harbor. Trembling with fear, he turned to face his master, prepared for an eruption of anger, followed by a vicious tirade of abuse. Yet it did not immediately come. The girl simply stood there in silence. She stared long and hard at the boy, her face betraying no expression whatsoever. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke. This was the calm before the storm. The boy began spitting out apologies. One second. Turn it up like a little bit. There you go. The boy began spitting out apologies, tripping over his words as his voice grew weaker by the second, like a short-circuit radio warbling its death knell. His body seemed to shrink and his shoulders slumped like a criminal awaiting judgment. You're absolutely useless! The girl's anger finally burst forth in one violent blast. Despite the ferocity of her exclamation, she managed to save enough breath to launch a sharp kick at the boy in the same moment. The well-aimed strike sent the boy flying further than her petite frame would suggest was possible. He seemed to hang in the air for a brief moment before resuming his journey downward. Wow, good lord, the imagery. On the edge of the pier, reaching a frigid end as he broke through the water's surface with a splash. She kicked him into the ocean? As soon as he returned to his senses, he began violently thrashing his arms about, pleading for aid between coughing up mouthfuls of cold water. My lady, please help me, he begged, his thrashing growing more desperate and frantic. You're going to find that pass, and I mean now. You're not leaving that water until I see it in your hands. But I can't swim, he burbled as his head began to slowly sink beneath the surface. I'm well aware. Please, his words were cut short as his lung filled with water, and the rest of his head bobbed below the surface. His thrashing ceased, and his silhouette grew faint as he quickly plummeted downward to the bottom of the bay. With the situation having reached an unacceptable level of risk, several onlooking crew members ran over to rescue the waterlogged butler. The moment the boy made it out of the bay, however, the still enraged girl tried to kick him right back in again. Miss, please, you must calm down, a crew member at the gate said, trying to pacify the young noble. How can I be calm about this? My father was unable to attend, so I'm here in his place. There are important business discussions taking place on the ship that I cannot afford to miss. And now, thanks to a certain someone's rank and competence, that is exactly what's going to happen. The girl gave the boy a menacing glare, so virulent it could have stripped the paint from the entire vessel. Tell me, worm, how exactly are you going to take responsibility for me being unable to board? Dang, bro. Though the boy was still coughing and violently spewing water, his already pallid face managed to lose what little color remaining in it. Upon hearing those words, feeling pity for the boy, the gate attendant stepped in. Well, for the time being, may I see your invitation, said. The boy moved to comply with this request, but was stopped dead in his track by the girl's menacing scowl. She produced the invitation herself and roughly shoved it at the attendant. The attendant read over the paper, then went through the list of names on the guest list. This invitation for Baron Chris Reinhardt. What? Who I can confirm is indeed on the guest list. May I presume you too are his daughter and her attendant? You presume correctly. I am Baron Reinhardt's eldest daughter, Cecilia Reinhardt. Celia Reinhardt. The gate attendant made a respectful bow before continuing to speak. Then there will be no need to further concern yourself with the matter of the boarding pass, Miss Reinhardt. You may proceed. Oh, we may? Strictly speaking, a decision of this nature required approval from a higher ranking employee. But in this case, the gate attendant decided that swift action was the best way to provide a peaceful solution to a rapidly worsening situation at hand. It seems as though you live to rid another day, you useless worm. Count yourself lucky. The girl boarded the ship, so start icy daggers at her butler. Sucker is legit half alive, bro. Nadia was on some crazy crud. He dragged her luggage on after her, still wheezing and dripping wet from the events of the past few minutes. He effusively expressed his gratitude to the gate attendant as he passed, receiving a sympathetic smile and a few words of encouragement. Which got dragged out of the ocean, dog. Resuscitated, got kicked again, and then still had to do her bidding, bro. I'm not gonna... Bro, Nadia should have took you just then, bro. Having finally boarded the ship, the two youths immediately headed for their room. Their pace was quick, as though they already knew the way, and not a single word was exchanged between them as they briskly walked down the halls. Once they arrived, they gave the room a quick yet thorough search. Infiltration complete. The girl broke their silence, suddenly speaking at a sleepy drawl. Her eyelids drooped, and she let... What the freak? The girl broke her silence, suddenly speaking at a sleepy drawl. Her eyelids drooped, just like how Nadia's is. And she let out a mighty yawn. Not a trace remaining of the tense high-handed young lady from only a few moments ago. I'm BS. They helped her to take a nap. She tossed her plush bear onto the bed and immediately launched herself after it. She dove under the covers with childlike exuberance, befitting someone of her age, perhaps even younger. In contrast to her whimsical new demeanor, the boy remained completely expressionless. Don't let your guard down. The real mission begins now. I thought this was the prologue to how they became who they are, and I guess it is, but dang, it makes sense now. As he brushed aside his bangs, still wet from the frigid water of the harbor, his now visible eyes were cold and sharp. Beneath that, however, was the gleam of a hunter fixed on his prey. Each and every reg of his body exuded composure. Dang, love it. So they legit put the whole novel into the game. Flustered, stammering butler from before was nothing but a memory. Though the girl's transformation was strange, the boy's sudden shift in personality was nothing short of jarring. That wasn't really your best work out there, S. Far from it. She spoke nonchalantly, rolling around the bed as she critiqued the boy's performance. He remained silent for a moment before speaking, almost as though he agreed with her assessment, at least in part. It didn't affect the mission, but you overdid each and every reaction. It's not easy to match that without seeing unnatural, hammering it up like that made us stand out more than we needed. Despite her words, the girl half-hearted tone took the bite out of her criticism. These were the duo's true personalities. The upper-class young lady and her bumbling butler making a spectacle at the boarding gate were simply elaborate pageantries, acts necessary for gaining entry to the ship and nothing more. Any other method of infiltration might have raised suspicion, endangering their mission. Thus, they chose to board under false identities. They had made clever use of the organization's info network beforehand, ascertaining which of the invitees would be unable to attend. Armed with this bit of intel, they created their personas. The invitations required for the boarding was printed on high-quality paper, but ultimately differed only in name. Using the same layout for each invitation was the logical choice for a merchant looking to pinch Mura wherever possible. Logical or not, that particular decision had made the necessary forgery a walk in the park. The boarding pass on the other end was a different story. The running company was known to employ cutting-edge technology to prevent forgeries. Attempting to use a fake pass to board was an act accompanied by a considerable amount of risk. This is why the two engineered the dramatic performance that took place at the boarding gate. The boy dropping their boarding pass was of course an intentional act, but the guts to win timely group of fish were the result of battle ornament. The girl had kept hidden in her stuffed bear, a clever method she had used many times in the past to cast art unnoticed. All of their hard work had paid off. The infiltration had gone exactly as planned. It was yet another successful operation for the boy known as 3 of Swords and the girl known as 9 of Swords in their life as professional assassins. to be continued. 3 and 9. Oh my, how? How long did that take me? Might be able to do it. At scheduled time, the ship departed. As he watched the shoreline shrink into the distance, 3 of swords spoke in a cold, flat voice. Target present confirmed. Have we pinpointed the enemy positioning? Is our route prepared? Yep, we're good to go. The young girl known as 9 of Swords stood behind the boy, answering a relaxed drawl. The polar opposite of her partner's icy tone. Having been dispatched by the organization to lay the groundwork for their mission, the assassination of the man responsible for this voyage, the wealthy merchant Haldor Barn. The organization was not particular about how they dealt with their targets, whether in swift silence or via recluse violence. Their only concern was making sure they did not draw attention of the Bracer Guild or the local police. As a hard rule, 3 and 9 will always select the most efficient method of what available. Excuse me. Will always select the most efficient method available to them. In this case, their mission was to prevent the ship from arriving in Calvert, with Haldor still alive on it. Haldor has strong ties with Swin, a sizable criminal organization in the Republic. Should he safely make it to his destination and take refuge under their protection, his extraction and subsequent elimination would prove an exceptionally difficult task. Aside from the engine area, the ship had 3 main floors. The lowest housed a considerable number of general passengers. Naturally, this was where 3 and 9's room was located. The second floor contained a hall used for parties, banquets, and meals, as well as other such events. Finally, the third floor featured luxury rooms prepared specifically for noble use. At present, however, the entirety of the floor was reserved by Haldor, who was enjoying the comforts of the room in the farthest back. Excuse me. All right. 3 and 9 put their equipment and tools in order and then sprang into action. The plan was to head to the hall on the second floor, but not before leaving a little gift on the first. The hall would be packed with passengers once dinner service began, given that only the ultra-wealthy and those with noble status were in attendance. The menu was likely to be suitably extravagant, yet once they arrived, they found that Haldor had not elected to appear, an act of caution perhaps. This was expected, however, and the two took their planned positions in the central area of the room. It's time. 3 quiet murmur was immediately followed by the din of an explosion from the floor below. The passengers began to panic, but their fear slowly subsided to uneasiness as security personnel deployed and headed to the first floor to investigate the situation. In truth, the explosion had been caused by a small makeshift bomb that 3 and 9 had planted in an unoccupied room. The blast wasn't particularly powerful, but was enough to ignite a number of small fires in the area. Their goal was to lure out security, and in that regard, the bomb had more than served its purpose. The plan was progressing at pace. Guess I'm up, 9. Guess I'm up, 9 said in her usual lackadaisical drawl. She gathered up the edges of her skirt in her hands and gently swayed it back and forth, resulting in a number of black spears thudding down the floor. A series of muffled pops reverberated throughout the hall, hurling a cloud of smoke and tear gas that quickly filled the room. What's going on? I can hardly breathe. Ugh, my eyes are tearing up. The gas was especially strong and would have no lasting effects on his victims. However, it was more than enough to send the already uneasy group of elites into a full-blown panic. 3 and 9 then began the next stage of their plan, the infiltration of the third floor. Currently, a bulk of security was on the first floor, meaning they would have to pass all the way through the second in order to respond to any emergency at the top of the ship. The large numbers of panicking passengers on the second floor wouldn't stall security for long, but the situation would still buy 3 and 9 all the time they would need. So far, the assassin's plan had gone flawlessly. Still, that didn't mean killing Haldor would be easy once they had reached him. The two hid themselves in the stairwell on the third and scouted ahead. 2 more there. From what I can see, it looks like we'll have 5 to deal with. 9 shared her observation with 3. in a hushed tone. He silently nodded and acknowledged. One look at the men standing guard ahead was enough to tell them they were neither typical passengers nor ship security. They were well armed, and their combat experience was practically carved into their hardened faces. Ex-Jaegers, huh? It was clear they had been hired not to protect the general guest, but to personally attend Hodor. Given that his room was located in the very back of the ship, it meant that the only way to reach him was through the battle-hardened veterans that currently barred 3 and 9's path. Avoiding a fight simply wasn't in the cards this time. I'll take lead. As she said this, 9 began to casually walk forward, her posture relaxed. She made no attempt to hide her approach, and even when the guards heard her soft footsteps and turned to look, they didn't register as a threat. An advantage afforded her by her candy sweet exterior. Oh, bro, she is a jacked up chick. Oh, I mean, it was obvious at the end of her act, in Act 3. But dang! Little lady, you're not allowed up here without permission. One of the guards said in a gravely voice. Yeah, we know. There's been some kind of disturbance downstairs, another chimed in. But this ain't an evacuation site. Get yourself back to your room. Their tone was a bit harsh, but considering they used to be Jaegers, their attitude toward 9 was almost amicable. She gestured towards Hodor's room. But I want to go in there, pretty please. 9 wasn't putting on the spoiled noble act she had used to sneak aboard the ship earlier in the day. This was probably as close to her genuine sleeping annotation as she would allow during a mission. You want to meet with Mr. Hodor, do you? Well, today ain't your lucky day, kid, because we got strict orders to not let anyone into this room. And there's nothing I can do to change your mind? 9 tilted her head as she spoke her presence, beginning to unnerve the guards. Nope, nothing. One of them finally responded. Oh, I see. That really is too bad. Despite her words, 9 didn't seem especially disappointed by their response. Taking her plush bear in her hand, she suddenly thrust it out in front of her. There was a flash of silver and a loud whip, followed by the thud of 2 of the guards collapsing to the ground. Their necks had each been pierced by 2 needles, which had been tipped in poison, a specialty of 9's, and her mainstay in combat. Ordinarily hidden within the bear, the needles could be used to quickly disperse various types of poison through a target's body when thrown at a vital. When did she throw it? 9 would typically carry up to 10 types of poisons, each suitable for a different situation. Depending on the circumstances, she would even use poison-free needles on occasion. This time, 9 has struck the 2 bodyguards with a neurotoxin that robbed the body of its ability to freely move. While not strong enough to kill, it was definitely enough to mobilize someone of substantial size for a good while. What the? Having sent somebody amiss, one of the remaining... Love it. Oh, that was how she did it. Bodyguards down the hallway turned to see what was happening. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a figure quickly moving in his direction. Before he could figure out what was happening, however, a blade flashed before his eyes, and he was on the ground. Incapacitated, along with his comrades, the swift takedown was executed by 3. 3 came through. S came through. He wielded a long sword with a thin blade that appeared sharp enough to cut the very air around it. Its construction resembled that of traditional Eastern swords, albeit with a straight blade instead of the typical curved one. Its design was surprisingly ornate, and curiously enough, it seemed to be missing a hit guard and part of the blade near its base. The 2 remaining bodyguards had seen what had happened, and had each already dropped into a fighting stance. No matter how youthful their opponents, it was clear they had no intention of pulling their punches. You little suckers, yelled one of them as he began swinging his axe downward. 3 met the attack with the sword, locking the assassin and the bodyguard in place. Seeing an opening, the other bodyguard drew his sword and attempted to stab 3. Wow, still holding the axe in place with his right hand, 3 quickly drew a short sword with his left, using it to deflect the second bodyguard's attack in one clean motion. The short sword resembled the long sword in nearly all aspects but length. Unlike the long sword, it had a hip guard. However, it seemed incomplete somehow, as though it was missing a piece. It was much less of an offensive weapon then the longsword being used mainly for defense. Despite his best efforts to fend off the attackers, it seemed as though 3 would quickly be overpowered. Even for him, it was difficult to hold back the weight of an attack from a grown man with only his right hand. Sensing that he needed to do something quickly, 3 intentionally stopped pushing back on the axe, deflecting it harmlessly to the side. With his remaining strength, he whipped around to face his staggering assailant, plunged his short sword deep into his torso. The other bodyguard quickly launched a flurry of attacks, but 3 pushed the critically wounded axe wielder into his comrade. The sword-wielding bodyguard was momentarily taken off guard, and 3 capitalized on the opening, cutting him down with both swords. Right, that should be. 3 turned to notify 9 that the guards had all been dispatched, but as he did, he saw the door to the VIP room open behind her. Out stepped another ex-Jaeger weapon, drawn his sights set on attacking the defenseless 9 while our guard was down, or so he thinks. Too much speed separated them for 3 to warn 9 in time. He pushed off his back heel with all his might, but stopped his dash a split second later, as did the final bodyguard. My, you're pretty sharp. I was wondering how long it'd take you to catch on. 9 turned lazily on her heel and cast a derisive glance over her shoulder. Her expression remained unfazed as thin red stripes appeared over the Jaeger's arms and legs, blood beginning to trickle out like sanguine tears. Better not move. Wriggle too much, and you'll be leaving in more pieces than you'll arrive. Her sweet appearance made her remarks all the more disconcerting and ghastly. The ex-Jaeger understood that this was no empty threat. He truly couldn't afford to take another step. The cause of his painful predicament was a web of superfine steel threads surround. Bro, she's on the level of Sharon. Holy snot! The cause of his painful predicament was a web of superfine steel threads surrounding him. Thanks to their special processing, the threads were roughly as sharp as a drawer full of top-end kitchen knives. 9 had laid a trap outside the door, one that an unassuming person would have been hard-pressed to detect with the naked eye. Any unfortunate soul who had tried to pass through the area with any degree of speed would have soon found themselves the centerpiece of a grisly blood-splattered tableau. The threads were connected to specially designed needles. 9 used as her main weapon. Such thread was notoriously difficult to use, and it was rarely regarded as being sufficiently powerful to use as one's only means of attack. While there were rumors of true masters who needed no other implements to eliminate their target, 9 had yet to attain such a level of skill with them. That said, she was still a menace in her own right, and a fiendishly clever master of traps besides, as the ex-Jaeger had just learned. 9 tossed a poison needle at her immobilized foe with minimum effort, and her hapless victim collapsed to the floor. She tilted her head to the side as she noticed 3 staring at her. "What? Is something wrong, S?" she asked, using a nickname she preferred to call 3 by. She would often refer to herself as N, which 3 took as a shortened version of 9. But when she spoke with 3, she would use S instead of T. He had assumed it to be short for swords, despite the word being part of both their names, but had never bothered to ask. Nothing at all. 3 tearlessly responded as he turned to face the VIP room door. At last, the pair stepped into the room, housing our target, Hador Barn, to be continued. Holy snot. The assassins and their target. Inside the room was opulence made manifest, the best of the best, enough to make the wealthiest nobles envious. In the center of its spacious layout sat Hador Barn, reclined on a sofa. He brought a glass of wine to his lips. As his feature twisted in weary, unpleasant expression, absolute incompetence. Such a simple job, yet apparently one completely beyond them. Mr. Barn had fully grasped the situation. He had given the order that no one be allowed in, but there were now 2 children standing before him. Given the commotion outside, it had been easy to guess what happened. Through their appearance made it hard to believe the 2 standing before him were no doubt professional assassins. here for his life. Still, Hador maintained his composure. He kept this realization hidden, refusing to allow so much as a hint of panic to creep into his features. The source of this confidence was a certain colossal machine that sat on the floor before him. Its mere presence made even the imposingly spacious room feel cramped. It towered over 2 arch in height, with 6 spider-like legs protruding from its body. Its humanoid upper half stood erect, with 4 menacing arms stretching out from it. The entire machine emitted an eerie glow, making for a most intimidating sight to behold. Wowee, that's a big one, 9 remarked, glancing up at it in archaism. 3 exclaimed, immediately shifting to a bow stance. This beauty is a new favorite of mine. A rather fruitful find at a recent back alley auction I happened to attend. And it wasn't cheap, let me tell you. But no, I didn't stop there. I'm a man who doesn't do things by half measures. I paid a princely sum to have it outfitted with the most cutting-edge technology available. Mirror well spent, in my opinion. I dare say I has enough firepower to easily wipe out an entire platoon of soldiers if I wanted it to. I mean, nothing could go up against it. In fact, it would be mere child's play. Barely able to contain a smug grin, Hador looked like a boastful child showing off his expensive toy at school. So the bums outside were just bouncers, then. And the monstrosity is what's actually here to protect you. 3 deduced. Oh, a sharp one! That's precisely correct, Hador said gleefully. As long as I have it by my side, my safety here is guaranteed. And once I make it to the Republic, I'll be untouchable. He allowed a long laugh, his voice rising higher and higher, echoing endlessly through the gauntlet chamber. Shockingly stupid. He really is an idiot, huh? The duo's comment weren't born from simple overconfidence. Even if they did somehow fail in their mission, and even if Hador did somehow manage to make it to Quinn territory, he had already been marked for death by the organization. They would pursue him to the bitter end. To the last man, he had 0 chance of survival. Attack! At Hador's order, the Archaism lurched into action. It set its sight on 3, charging straight for him. 9 took the opportunity to begin casting her arts, while her partner specialized in close quarters combat. She was a force to be reckoned with when it comes down to orbital arts. As she began the charge, however, one of the Archaism's arms rapidly folded out into a gun. The muzzle pointed in 9's direction. Without delay, it sprayed a hail of bullets at her. Whoa! 9 evaded the gunfire by her hair, breath, that was forced to abandon casting her arts. The Archaism focused its attention back on 3, who was busy fending off its melee attacks with a longsword. 9 sprinted to the other side of the room and started her cast again. The machine's aim was too adept, however, and she found herself unable to escape it long enough to get an art off. It appeared that their foe was equipped with a powerful arts detection sensor, one that allowed it to identify incoming orbital attacks and counterattack before they could be launched. Forced to abandon her casting yet again, 9 screwed up her face in frustration, suddenly gripped her plush bear. This thing doesn't play nice. I quit, she said in a huff. It was a fair point. Poison tip needles wouldn't have been particularly effective against the steel plating of a machine. And without the ability to cast her arts, 9 found herself at a loss. 3, however, remained unperturbed and readied himself for another onslaught. I'm going to grab a little shut-eye. Wake me up when this witch took a freaking nap. Wake me up when the fight's over, okay? 9 said as she flopped down on one of the room's sofa using her bear as a pillow. 9, cut it out. I need you to stay awake. 3 shot from across the room. Despite this, 9 didn't react at all. As she dozed, the Archaism seemed to disregard her as a threat. Oh, she said no. She is setting up. This chick went to sleep to play sleep to be able to throw it off. Oh, she's going for Hador, while S goes for the Archaism. She's going for Hador then. Focuses attention on 3. Its forearms transform into a sword, a lance, and an axe, and a gun. Proceeded to launch a relentless string of attacks at the already overwhelmed assassin. 3 leapt out of the way as the machine's sword arm cut into arc through the air, only to then see the lance rocketing towards him. He narrowly avoided it, but his escape path was blocked by a mighty swing of the axe. Meanwhile, the Archaism had its gun trained in Hador's direction. Even in the heat of a combat, it prioritized protecting his master against any approaching threats. Swift moves and deft swordplay with the foundation of Three's combat style, but they were little use against such a powerful machine. The Archaism was simply too fast, and its attacks were both explosively powerful and aimed with deadly precision. Further, its six-blade afforded it perfect balance, and its multiple arms allowed it to launch attacks faster than Three could keep up. To his irritation, Three found his skill set completely useless against the metal monstrosity. Sure, he was a better fit for the task than Nine, but only by a slim margin. Regardless, he continued to fight both blades, flashing as they moved to intercept his foe. The sheer number of attacks coming at him forced Three to focus entirely on defense. He parried, dodged, and deflected the relentless wave of strikes, biding his time, waiting for the machine to leave an opening for him to strike with longsword. Good lord, bro. S is on another level. The violent dance continued on for some time. Three had managed to land a number of blows to the machine's body and arms, but each had resulted in no more than a metallic twang as the blade was repelled by its solid metal armor. It's no use, child. The armor was specially commissioned, and your pathetic little butter knives doesn't have a snowball's chance at Gehenna against them. Hador's mockingly tone grated on Three's nerves. It was made worse by the fact it was clear he wasn't lying. Three's attacks had been completely ineffective so far. Still, Three had yet to... I wonder, did Three use his mark here? Three had yet to suffer any wounds, given how things were going, though it was only a matter of time before he was slowly worn down. Analysis complete. Nine suddenly began speaking, apparently having woken up from a nap. Still lounging on the sofa, she continued, her voice flatter and more precise than usual. Arms, joint 1, down, 5 legs, joint 2, up, 3 legs, waist, rotation, axis, center, left side of chest, up, 2/5, left, 1/5. The first to respond was not Three, but Hador. You little wrench, how did you do that? He was flustered clearly, shocked at Nine and figured out the Archaism's structural weak points. Nine slowly rose from the sofa and reverted back to her usual drawl, slipping her rubber in her eyes as she spoke. I could tell by the sound. It takes a bit of concentration, though. Pure disbelief was etched into Hador's face. Three, on the other hand, looked as composed as ever. He had known from the start what Nine was doing. He was simply buying time until analysis was complete. S! Now! Right! Three readied himself and rushed at the Archaism. His swordplay swifter than ever, a veritable tornado, slashes and stabs. Each of his attacks hit upon one of the weak points that Naya pointed out. He suddenly switched to his scorched sword and performed the same volley of attacks, hitting each point a second time, but the result was the same as before. Naya saved the same high-pitched metallic sound that rang out with each hit. It didn't appear that the Archaism had been damaged in a slice. Hador was beside himself with laughter, relishing watching the young assassin struggle. What a joke! You can swing those little swords, all of yours, until the palms come home, but you're never getting through that armor. All part of the process. Letting the simple reply linger in the air, Three lined up his short swords with the empty section in the base of his long sword. The two blades locked into place, becoming a single weapon, their sharp edges lining up perfectly. At first glance, it would be difficult to tell the two were ever anything other than a single sword. Hador watched the process with interest, but then burst in mocking laughter a moment later. Proud of your pocket knife, little boy. Do you honestly think that would be your ticket to victory? Truth be told, even in its combined state, the reach of Three's sword hadn't improved any, nor was the weapon sharper or faster. The slightly increased weight of the blade may have provided some increase in power, but certainly not enough to break through the Archaism's thick armor. Given the opponent at hand, the weapon truly seemed little better than a toy. Three chose to remain silent and let his weapon do the talking. He swung at the weak point of the Archaism's leg, the same spot he had targeted before. This time, however, his strike was followed by a loud He marked him. He freaking marked him. This time, however, his strike was followed by a loud explosion and Archaism's leg flew across the room. The blast seemed to have come from within Archaism itself. It was powerful enough to have blown its limb clean off. He used revelation at that point. At a glance, it seemed similar to a fire element art, but neither 3 nor 9 appeared to have cast anything. Even if they had, the Archaeum sensor would surely have detected it. What? Nadia? The Hador stammered, his face twisted with shock and fear. Another swing by 3's sword, followed by another explosion. A second of the Archaeum's limbs, he did that earlier, was sent flying to a corner of the room. What the crud's going on? Hador screeched, no longer trying to hide the panic. His tone quickly deteriorated, bro. He watched all his mirror go up in flames. His tone quickly deteriorated from alarm to abject terror. This is no ordinary sword. 3 began to speak, his face devoid of expression. It's fully integrated with a battle orbit, forming a single weapon. Well, strictly speaking, I suppose it's closer to ordinary orbit than a battle orbit. The location and timing specifications were complicated, as with the use of the specialized orbit and conjunction. With some automated processing, the end result was an instantaneous cast time. However, if the wielder was skilled enough, they'll be able to launch powerful attacks without the need for any charge-up period. It was in this ability that the true value of 3's weapons lay. But having suffered enormous amount of damage from the rapid arch strikes unleashed on it, the Archaeans began throwing sparks in all directions. It began to dawn on Hamdor that victory was no longer an option for him, and he began desperately looking for a means of escape. Stop! Stop fighting and get me out of here now! He ordered the Archaeism in a shrill yell. Reacting to his new orders, the machine quickly rotated its torso and began moving toward him. I don't think so, a lazy voice called out from across the room. During the commotion, its remaining spider-like legs had been bound with a complex web of steel, rendering it immobile. This is the end. 3 quickly struck its remaining weak points in rapid succession. The resulting series of explosions tore the machine to pieces, littering its surrounding with burnt steel and charred components. When the smoke had cleared, the room was so filled with broken parts, it was more than a scrapyard than a suite. What remained of the Archaeism's body ceased all function and collapsed. His chassis mangled beyond recognition. 3 deftly wove his way through the junk, scattered at his feet, silently moving toward Hador. Stay back! A pitiful squeak escaped Hador's throat as he scrambled backward, away from the approaching assassin. There was no way to run, however. 3's mission was nearing its end, yet he didn't feel happiness or even relief. He took a step closer. He felt his sword suddenly grow heavy in his hand. He forced himself to take another step. His legs felt like they were encased in concrete. His whole body felt like it was desperately rejecting his advance, trying to pull itself away. Another step. This was how it all always ends. All that remained was for him to fulfill his role. It was nothing but Wait, what? So these suckers are machines. So they're not really like boy and girl. They were made. But a tool, a machine. This was how it was supposed to be. 3 took one final step forward. There's no need to share any details with you. Still, I figure you at least deserve to know who's in your life. To know, 3 thought to himself, whose name to curse as you burn in the fires of Gehenna. I am 3. Of swords. He plunged his blade deep into Hamdor's chest, piercing the man's heart. I'm an assassin from the organization. By this point, the panic on the second floor had largely subsided, and the ship's security guards were finally starting to move to the 3rd floor. Picking up on this, 3 and 9 quietly broke open the window and jumped through it to the sea outside. It's a good thing this mission was on an airship. That would have made escape way more of a pain, 9 remarked. Agreed. She was right. Escaping from an airship would have necessitated a specialized aircraft for the operation, as well as forcing the 2 to leap from ship to ship mid-air. It wouldn't have been entirely impossible for the young assassins, though, and surely someone in their wide world had carried out such an operation before. Operation before. 9 softly called out to 3, again using her preferred nickname for him. He was a corrupt man, an evil man. The 2 of them looked back toward the ship. There was no need for further explanation between the 2. Yeah, 3 said quietly. I know. He had been thorough in reading through the mission Doiser and knew that Nine spoke true. Haldor was a sucker through and through. One that had performed all kinds of horrible acts in the pursuit of Mira. His mere existence sullied the world and society was better off. That's what they always say, bro. To make it easier. Yo, we got rid of a nuisance, dog. We got rid of a nuisance. You don't need to feel any type of pain. You took out a big threat in the world, bro. You should be proud that you took him out. I'll be like, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's a human life, you know? It's hard to do, to comfort yourself over knowing that. When it came down to it, a hit was a hit. A target could be a person with the purest heart on the continent or the scummiest bomb feeder imaginable. If an assassination order came in from the organization, 3 and 9 followed it. That's how it always was, I guess. 9 went silent. She took something out from her plush bear and began blowing into it. It gradually took the shape of an inflatable raft, big enough for one. 9 climbed aboard it and flopped down once again, using her bear as a pillow. I'm going to catch another few weeks. I'll leave this part to you, S. K? This part meant for 3 to swim them both to shore. Your legs work just fine, he retorted. Do it yourself. Despite his words, 3 felt a twinge of something resembling affection in his heart. He and 9 had been operating together for over a year by this point. She was a little younger than him, and suddenly found himself thinking of her as more a little sister than just his partner. Their natural rapport aside, she was also someone he could truly rely on during their missions. Despite this, 3 understood the situation. He understood that even if 9 was his partner, even if he thought of her as a little sister, he could never let his guard down. He could never truly trust her. Dang, bro. Chapter 4, 3 of Swords. Oh, so we get their backstory. They haunt me relentlessly. All the people I murdered over the years. I've cut off their heads, carved their hearts from their chests, sliced their torso. This is the reason why they didn't want to make a game out of these suckers. This is the reason why. They wanted to use novel imagery to pretty much portray the story. Slice their torso right through the middle. But no matter what I do, an army of corpses continue to pursue me. I see them every time I close my eyes. The politicians, the nobles, the merchants, the rich and powerful. Just leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. I finally swing my sword at them. I cut and cut, bisecting them, slashing them apart. They don't relent. Chunks of flesh and bone, mascara and intestines, lungs and brains. They gather into a withering mass that comes crashing down on me like a gory wave, threatening to swallow me whole. Get away, get away, get away. Brother had Thorfinn experience, like his crud that he went through in season 2 of Villain Saga. I tried to escape, but they cornered me again and again. My victims staring at me with hollow eyes, accusing me. How could you do this to us? How? They threw themselves at me, their decaying fingers gripping my neck, trying to rip the life out of me, just as I did to them. Let me go, let me go, let me go, let me go. I finally thrash and struggle, but no matter what I do, I can't break away. Rhine blood, bile trickles down my body, but dissolving my skin. The wave finally swallows me up. I just want normal life. I just want my humanity back. I woke from my nightmare, my breath short and ragged. My entire body was soaked in a horrible sweat. I fought back the rising urge to vomit. The night after completing a mission was always like this. The only difference was seeing one more face in the crowd. Even after years, my disgust for murder had never abated. Not even in the slice. No matter how much time passed, I couldn't rid myself of the scars left in my mind by the terrible acts I performed, and yet I had no choice but to continue. 9 and I were nothing but tools. Our individual thoughts and ideals had no meaning. They were completely unnecessary. All the organization required from us was a skillful capacity for murder and unquestioning subordination to kill as we were ordered to. Our entire existence boiled down to this singular point. To reject an order or attempt escape is tantamount to suicide, the organization. What's crazy is when we took on that sucker, like I guess this story's boss, right? The final boss for this story, right? He did talk about them like turning on the organization and leaving it. So I'm not gonna lie, like thinking back to that act, to their crud finale, It just hits different now because this was what was going through their mind. So I want to know who was that guy, because he's not in the game. Like, I don't think no game covers him. Probably reference him, but man, I feel like I should have read this before I did finish up their side on Act 3. To even speak his true name was forbidden. It was a group of professional killers. I wonder was Ren part of that? Well, she was in Ouroboros from what I heard. That existed in the shadows of society. Its core business was eliminating marks, but its true objective likely lay elsewhere. As a low-ranking member, I was simply one of the organization's weapons. There was no reason for such info to be shared with me. Most members of the organization have served it since they were children. Children deemed to possess special potential were made to undergo combat instruction and exercise in a place known as factory. The majority of children who enter the factory would never again see beyond its walls, unable to endure. So they're not machines. They are trained to become machines, lifeless, like type of like they're people, but their minds are so manufactured to think a specific type of way at youth, so that they become killing machines when they reach almost adulthood. Well, teenage, when they become teenagers. So I guess that's why, like he said, they're machines. But yeah, I mean, I think it could go that way. So Swin and Nadia are humans, but when they entered the organization, they were like children, and they were trained to become assassins. So they became tools to a sense. The majority of children who enter the factory will never again see beyond its walls. Unable to endure the merciless training they were put through, it will become their tomb. The lucky ones who did survive, however, were officially recognized as entry-level members of the organization, and that was them. That's what happened with me. I was forced to abandon who I was when I first passed through a factory's doors. Yep, there it is. Anyone who dared utter their former name will be subject to severe punishment. There was no concept of individuality. Life in the organization meant being nothing more than another tool in the arsenal. Exactly, I figured that. But dang, bro. That's insane, bro. Holy snot. It wasn't until I graduated at the age of 10 that I was given a name. It only served to solidify my status as a weapon. However, our names, more like titles, are based on tarot cards. Oh, shoot. In my case, the minor card I received was from the Minor Arcana 3 of Swords. It didn't have even the slightest bit of humanity to it, but it was better than having no name at all. Both the higher-ups and a small faction of the very best candidates were given a name based on the Major Arcana. Oh, dang. Everyone who survived training and made it in was skilled, but in terms of combat ability, the Major Arcana could run circles around the rest of us. Oh, dang. They were even more powerful than top-ranked bracers. I left my room and peeked into a neighboring one. It seemed like 9 was still sleeping. It was time for my report, so I headed out on my own. Lower-level members of the organization generally operate in pairs. My partner is 9 of Swords, a girl, 1 year, my junior. 9 was a natural genius. She graduated from the factory in a single year, despite the fact that the average kid takes 3 to 5, if they even make it to graduation while dropping out. Dropping out probably means death. From gathering info to analyze battle situation, acting abilities to infiltrate tactics, she was top class in a multitude of fronts. That's to say, nothing of her combat style, which made use of needles and threads, allowing her to control the field of battle and dominate her foes. All in all, her abilities were far better suited to assassinations than mine were. It was a bit awkward for us when we were first paired up, but after working together for a year, I could honestly say she was the best partner I ever had and the most reliable. At the same time, she was also the person I needed to regard with the most caution. The reason why the organization used a partner system were twofold. The obvious reason was that it helped facilitate missions, but it also forced each partner to monitor the other. In the organization, betrayal was swiftly returned with death. Obviously, a tool is doomed to serve until it breaks. As such, we were expected to be part of the organization the entirety of our life. As a general rule, we were afforded no freedom. There did however, exist special rules. If one were to sense that their partner was scheming to betray the organization, they could sell them out to gain their own freedom. All you had to do was make your report, present sufficient evidence of your suspicion, and then you were given the task of eliminating them yourself. If you succeeded, you were free. Simply right away, man, resign yourself to looking over your shoulder the rest of your life. The organization had eyes everywhere. Anyone who wanted true freedom was better off waiting for their chance to turn their partner in. There was another problem too. The worst of the worst would actually fabricate proof of their partner's betrayal in an effort to earn their own freedom. Thus, the person you need to regard most cautiously was not an enemy you faced on any mission, but the partner who was always at your side. You needed to entertain and accept the notion that you could be betrayed at any time. Members did not turn their backs on the organization. This was an absolute requirement for survival, and a lesson I learned. Ace of Swords. Oh, shoot. Very early on through personal experience 3 years ago, I tried to escape. Well, I suppose it was more we than I. At that time, I was partnered with another boy, one known as Ace of Swords. Ace was a year my senior, and he was a pretty good guy. We got along well enough, and he quickly, so that means Ace of Swords was Nadia's brother. So whenever Swin said, I told him that I would protect her. So this had to be him. Ace was a year my senior, and he was a pretty good guy. We got along well enough, and he quickly grew into an older brother figure for me. He wielded a giant sword with ease, one as long as he was tall, and he used it both to destroy our enemies and protect me. He really was an ace when it came to battle. In that sense, his name couldn't have been more appropriate. One thing Ace and I shared was contempt for the murders we were forced to perform. I can't remember how the idea of escaping the organization came up initially, but I do recall that neither of us objected to it. As I mentioned, the system was set up to prevent individual members from betraying the organization, as they could be sought out by the partner. We figured the best way around that was to simply work together and escape the organization as a team. With our objective decided on, we began planning in earnest. We quickly decided we needed to execute our plan as far as away from other pairs of assassins employed by the organization. First part of our plan went well enough. We entered our Bronia thinking that it's considerable distance from our normal area of operation, meant we could enjoy a certain degree of safety. That was a severe misjudgment on our part, though. The organization had eyes there as well. We were approached by other pair of assassins twice, and both times ended with combat. We managed to fend them off. However, Ace and I were partners for a reason, and we fought well together. Third time, however, it was our overseer who paid us a visit. To say that his powers was overwhelming wouldn't do it justice. It was like trying to fight a force of nature. We barely managed to escape with our lives, suffering heavy wounds in the process. With nowhere else to go, we huddled together in a cave, conscious of the fact that our next encounter with the overseer would surely be our last. This guy be the sucker at the end of Act 3 for them. That dude with the with that orb. There was nothing more to be said about the situation for what I felt like an eternity. We passed the time in silence. Hey Ace, I began speaking, believing that would be the last conversation we'll ever have. What's up, buddy? I just wanted to say that, all things considered, I think everything could have went a lot worse. What's that supposed to mean? He struggled through the pain and forced out a little smirk at my comment. Don't get me wrong, I have plenty of regrets, but still, Ace waited in silence for me to continue. Being by your side all this time, well, it's made my life so much better, Ace. And even if we were fated to meet our deaths here, it's a million times better than spending a lifetime as just another tool. The fire flickered. Our shadows danced on the cave wall. Finally, Ace broke the silence. His voice a mere whisper. 3. Thanks for everything, man. You too, Ace. Thank you. I had said what I needed to say. I felt that if our Ace is going to betray him, I bet. Opponents were to arrive at that very moment, it would be I'd at least be able to give my whole soul to the battle. But then, if that's how you feel, Ace started. Suddenly, ambience in the cave completely shifted, like some horrible hallucination. Ace's icy voice pierced through me, chilling me to the bone. Then die, buddy. Die for me. My first reaction was slight confusion. I actually interpreted it as a clumsy way of saying that we would face our deaths together. I turned to face him just to clarify, and what I saw next was Ace's massive sword speeding down toward my head. I immediately dodged his strike, and the ground where I had been laying only a moment ago had been shattered to dang, that sucker's strong! To rubble. Ace, what are you doing? I cried out. You can't figure it out on your own? Have you forgotten the final rule for those who betrayed the organization? The final rule, I hadn't forgotten it. Assembly, I hadn't given it much thought. It seemed relevant to our situation, but everything clicked into place then. When two partners betrayed the organization, the only way for one of them to gain its forgiveness was to kill their partner and present the organization with the corpse. The idea behind this rule was to force escapees into a sense of desperation and then push them into killing each other, taking care of the problems so the organization didn't have to. To my absolute shock, this was precisely what Ace was trying to do. I understood what was happening, but all I could do was ask why, over and over. Ace, why? Why are you doing this? You know, buddy, becoming partners with you was the only bit of luck I've had in my whole goddess cruddy life. I really did want it to be free together, to get our humanity back together. Then why are you? Because I need to survive, he said, his voice dripping with desperation. I can't die like this. Screaming wildly, Ace swung his sword at me again. The same sword that had been used to save my life more times than I could count was now being used as an attempt to end it. Just die, he screamed. I tried to scream back, but the horrible knot in my stomach and the storm of emotions in my heart ensured that the only thing that came out of my mouth was a meaningless warble. As I met his sword with my own, engulfed in despair, I surrendered control of my instinct and engaged this enemy in combat as I would any other. I don't clearly remember what happened from there. All I know is that I was overtaken by rage and sadness and became a slashing, screaming monster. I was finally brought to my senses by the sound of Ace's body collapsing to the ground. That's how I managed to survive, how I won back my position as one of the organization's tools, and that's where I've been ever since. Our escape was a deadly failure that laid bare my inadequacies. I started giving up on winning back my humanity, but I'd be cruddy if I was going to trust anyone else again. That's why he looks at Nadia that way. Dang! Chapter 5, The Overseer and the Report. The town was practically empty, and the first rays of dawn were only just beginning to pierce the dark sky above. Stepping out at the end, 3 inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with the chilly air in an effort to dispel his drowsiness. The town known as Luzent was located on the border of Calvert and Reverie. 3 and 9 will often undertake missions in both countries, making that centrally located toward town a perfect base of operations. East of the town was an official border, crossing into Calvert. In stark contrast, westward lay a mountain road known only to a select few. It was a treacherous path to be sure, but also one that facilitated entry into the Republic without the need to go through the official channels. 3 headed to the designated rendezvous point, a small hill surrounded by weathered boulders. The site was deep in the mountains and therefore free of unwanted eyes. There he found a black silhouette waiting for him. It was a man hidden in snow, wrapped in a tattered black cloak that obscured his face and body both. Despite his bedraggled attire, his presence had an insurmountable weight to it, instead of a primal sort of fear into any who laid eyes on him. I'm here to make my report, said 3. Yeah, that's the sucker. That's the sucker, bro. That's him. In response, the cloaked figure uttered only a single word. Speak. This man, known as the Overseer, was one of the higher-ranking members of the organization. He was given the name of from the Major Arcana. But those who served under him referred to him simply as the Overseer. As the title suggested, he watched over 3 of the rest of the organization's tools. He was the one who provided missions, instructions, and received their reports. 3 relayed the details of the Haldor mission to the Overseer. As he finished, the man spoke again. Next, Right. Regarding Nine of Swords, as part of the debriefing, every member was required to report on their partner's activities. Each of the pair would separately describe what they did and what they observed their partner doing. Even the slightest discrepancy between the pair's report was regarded with suspicion. The objective behind this requirement was to instill them with fear. Fear that any plot they may hatch to betray the organization would swiftly make its way to the ears of their superiors. That is all, 3 said as he finished his report. Very well, the overseer said. You will be contacted with instructions for your next mission once they are ready. Understood. 3 turned to head back to town, but as he did, the overseer spoke again. It was a little more than a whisper, but it was delivered with a weight that froze 3 in his tracks. Stop. 3 slowly turned around to face the overseer. As always, his dark hood completely covered his face. It has been 3 years now. You've not been designing any more plans, have you? 3 felt a sudden chill shoot down his spine. The overseer's suffocating gaze was laced with a powerful malice. There was no need for 3 to ask for clarification. He knew the overseer was talking about his escape attempt 3 years prior. The Emperor had personally conducted many of the organization's purges of runaway members. As their very lives became threatened, many lower-ranking members would find themselves overwhelmed by fear, rendering them powerless before the merciless Emperor. Thus, even within the organization, a cruel place in its own right, the Emperor had earned himself a reputation for his savagery. He was also the very same man who had tracked down 3 and Ace during their escape attempt. Had he already picked up on 3's new plan to escape? No. 3 found the thought absurd. He had taken every step with the utmost care and prudence. Further, if the Emperor had obtained some proof of 3's wrongdoings, the young assassin would already be dead. This was a test. If 3 wavered here, even in the slightest, it would mean his end. I will never again attempt something so foolish. I am a tool of the organization, nothing more. My sole purpose is to take lives of my targets. Dang, I'm glad I'm reading this, but holy snot. The way he cast his eyes, his calculated and practiced manner of speech, his natural breathing patterns, 3 had pulled it off to perfection. Silence hung heavy in the air between them for a moment. Finally, the Emperor spoke. I do hope this is the case. The murderous presence faded from the air, as did the tension that had been building in 3's chest. There are certain expectations riding on your shoulders, the Emperor said. I will fully devote myself to meet them, 3 said. In the same practiced tone, he moved once more to return to town and was not stopped this time. He bought it. This sucker ass! Bro! This is a bad sucker. This is a bad sucker. Back at his inn room, 3 let out a sigh of relief as he collapsed into his bed. Nothing had really happened during his exchange with the overseer, but nonetheless, he felt completely drained. Without exception, each interaction he had with the overseer was psychologically exhausting. This was to be expected, however, as he was indeed hiding his true intentions from the organization. In truth, 3 had been planning a second escape attempt. The past 3 years had been grueling, but it did nothing to quash his fervent desire for freedom. If anything, his resolve to reclaim his humanity had only grown stronger by the day. However, each day also saw his blood-drenched hands growing yet heavier with sin. He was a mere tool, human in physical form only. What few shreds of humanity still remained in his heart, he feared would be forever lost before much longer. Each new day that dawned could be that day that finally slipped away into being no more than a device, one whose only function was assassination. Put simply, a cold-hearted monster. That was the terrifying future he dreaded above all else. I absolutely need to succeed this time. I need to get out. His plan had 2 requirements he absolutely needed to meet in order to succeed. First off, he needed to avoid direct confrontation with the overseer. Second, 9 could not find out about his plan. Regardless of their partnership, he had to be careful to avoid even giving the impression that he longed for freedom. Of course, this meant that 3 would be forced to abandon 9, someone who had fought at his side through countless life or death situations. The girl was even younger than he was, but for all her genius, there seemed to be something off about. Wow, I wonder what told you that. Nonetheless, whenever 3 thought about the moment, he would pull the trigger and finally put his plan into motion. He always felt a strange sensation welling up inside of him. Strangely enough, it was a desperate urge to fill her in. There were a number of times where 3 had tried actually, but before he could even get the first word out, however, memory of Ace's sword speeding down towards him would flash through his mind. In the end, he always remained silent. I can't take this anymore. I can't let my scars define me. I know what I have to do. There's no other way. 3 shook off his thoughts plaguing him and returned his focus to preparing for escape. The only person I could trust is myself. The rest of the day went by quickly, and before long, dusk began to settle on the town. The day saw 3's diligence pay off at last. His final preparation had gone as smoothly as he could have hoped for. The time had finally arrived. He would set his plan into motion at night. Once 9 fell asleep, he would leave town via the mountain road. Once in Calvert, he would be traveling by car, and he had already arranged for a rental to take him up north to a certain city. Once he arrived, he promptly set out for LeBron. Oh, dang! Via one of the international airships routes. The regulated brother trying to make himself a full escape. He had yet to decide what to do after that point. He could stay a night or two in LeBron, or perhaps head over to Lemon. In any case, he needed to get as far away from his current location as possible. He may have been in the lowest rung of the organization and had no idea what went on among its upper echelons, but he was determined to show them all that he was capable of, casting off the shackles that they had bound him with. His rising determination was interrupted by a crow flying into the room. It made a few circles in the air before landing on the table. What the? Oh, their next mission. Taking a closer look at the bird, 3 noticed a specific crest adorning one of its legs. As he did, his face twisted into grimace. What if the mission is to kill Nadia? It could only mean one thing. This was the method the overseer used to communicate. Now he wants to meet now? It hadn't even yet been an entire day since 3 had delivered his report. They're briefing for the next mission, maybe? Even though he said the words, he was gripped by an indescribable sense of dread and anxiety. However, much he wanted to simply ignore the summons was not a luxury he could afford. The only chance his plan had of succeeding was if he was able to put a good amount of distance between himself and his would-be pursuers before the overseer realized what had happened. With 3 to ignore a direct order, however, the organization would immediately recognize it as an act of rebellion, one that would inevitably lead to his death. Mentally preparing himself for another encounter, one he could not avoid, 3 set out for their meeting location. The rendezvous point was the foot of a small hill deep within the mountains. The same side had been just that morning, in fact. There remained no trace of the ominous, eerie stillness that pervaded the place before, however bathed by the light of the setting sun. The weathered boulders seemed wreathed in brilliant flames from a distance. 3 arrived to find 2 figures already waiting for him. The first was the overseer, draped in the same tattered robe as usual. The thought occurred to 3 that it made the man look more the part of the hermit of Kana than it did the emperor. At the man's side stood a young girl. A young girl carrying a large stuffed bear of 9. Her attire was more or less the same as what she wore on the Haldor mission, with a few alterations to make it more functional and mobile. Her presence there did not cause any alarm for 3 after all. If they had been called to be briefed on the next mission, it was only natural she would be summoned as well. Some felt different, however. 3 couldn't put his finger on why, but anxiety began gripping his chest. So, you've arrived, the overseer said as 3 approached. Yes, what is my task? The initial exchange was the same as it always was. What happened afterward, however, was decidedly not. Make your appeal. My appeal? 3 said slowly, the anxiety in his chest rising. I have received a report detailing your treachery. Ain't no freaking way! I don't. 3 stammered. He was at the utter loss of words. He had calculated each and every outcome that could potentially happen, going over the steps in his head, time and again, and the absolute worst one is setting him up. They have to set him up to see if he's actually trying to betray them. This gotta be a setup. It was now playing out right before his eyes. A wave of despair washed over him. Could this really be happening again? Had 9 betrayed him just like Ace? It wasn't possible, 3 thought. He hadn't told her a thing. He knew that their relationship was strictly professional, and he could not, under any circumstances, trust her. That was just how partnerships in the organization worked. How could she have known? It didn't make any sense. There had been some kind of mistake. 3 attempted to defend himself, knowing full well it was futile endeavor. You can't talk yourself out of this, S. No. 3 of swords. 9 finally spoke, but her usually sleeper demeanor was nowhere to be found. Instead, her voice was crisp, her eyes alert. She removed a scrap of paper from within her bear, showed it to 3. This is your ticket for an airship. Ain't no freaking where that? Ain't. You're cooked! Man's cooked! Man is cooked! Man is legit cooked. There's no way out of it. There's no way around it. Man is cooked. Oh Lord, this hurts me. This hurts. Had 9 betrayed him just like Ace? It wasn't possible, 3 thought. He hadn't told her a thing. He knew it. Oh, okay. This year taken for an airship voyage to Labral, the one you booked for noon tomorrow. 3 felt the ground fall out from under him. Amidst his shock, a small part of him wanted to yell out that the ticket was fake, that he had the real... It's a setup, but to do so would be tantamount to suicide. Now continued speaking, as though directly responding to 3's unspoken questions. The ticket you have in your possession is a counterfeit. I swapped it for the genuine one while you weren't paying attention. Fresh from completing a mission that utilizes this very same kind of forgery, 3 now found himself the victim of this exact same trick. Either way, the name you used to acquire this ticket was Rhines Folkhart, student of Genis Royal Academy. Correct? 9 continued. That's the same name you used for your false ID on one of our missions last year. That would mean you've been planning this for quite some time, wouldn't it? Despite the immediate threat to his life, 3 couldn't help but admire 9's genius, strangely enough. 3 decided he wouldn't even try to come up with an excuse. 9 clearly seen right through his plan. She's seen right into his mind, really. There was just one part he didn't understand. Even if it was her duty to sell him out like this, even if she was a genius, he had been so cautious and prudent in every step of his plan, yet it had all been laid bare, seemingly without a trace of effort. How the crud had this happen? I take that expression to mean you're trying to puzzle out just how your entire plan was exposed, 9 said, a slight smile playing at the corner of her lips. It was clear to 3. She was toying with him now, mocking him. You do realize I've been watching you the whole time. We've been partners, right? You've been my only target right from day one. Her tone was merciless. Her word. This is going to be interesting because how this thing could go. 9 could be saying this to rat out S, right? Nadia could be saying this to rat S out, right? Or I should call them 9 because I guess they don't get their true names until at the end of this novel. So she could be doing this in front of the overseer to try and get her freedom, right? Because she hasn't been acting real lovey-dovey with S all throughout. So this was where their relationship really began. How they became Swin and Nadia. And why she's always liking S for some reason. This had to have been where it started to be born. But she wanted her freedom. But man, these next few chapters are going to be crazy. You do realize I've been watching. Her tone was merciless, her words dripping with thinly vine venom. Yes, I've been watching you. 3 inspecting, observing, and they're doing all this in front of the Emperor. That's what's crazy. The only real challenge was remaining patient as I wait for you to slip up and finally show your true colors. It's been that way since the moment I became your partner. 3 struggled to wrap his mind around what 9 was saying. The fact is, you did attempt to betray the organization. But even if you hadn't, I would have falsified whatever I needed in order to ensure your demise. She continued to speak, leaving nothing unsaid despite the overseer's presence with each word. 3 felt more and more baffled. He could understand her observing him to the degree that their job required. But where was this malicious hatred of hers coming from? She felt this way from the start. Why? The overseer, who had been silent for some time, let out a low, derisive laugh. I take it you have yet to figure it out, who she is. I mean, 3 could not, for the life of him, figure out what this was supposed to mean. He looked over at 9, searching for some sort. So, I'm going to make a guess. Nadia is the little sister to Ace. Nadia is Ace's little sister. Gotta be. I was thinking about that the entire time. 3 could not for the life of him figure out what this was supposed to be. Looked over at 9, searching for some sort of clue. All he was met with, however, was a glare of pure hatred, one that made him shudder in fear. He had never seen her look that way before. Do you remember? I freaking knew it! Do you remember Ace of Swords, your former partner? She began before her voice gained a measured deadly weight to it. The one you murdered. And it's not like I read earlier. It just was obvious, bro. Everything just seems to connect with each other, bro. It's crazy. 3's world began spinning. He started to feel violently ill. His senses dulled. His mind went blank. It became hard to breathe, as though he was being pulled to the bottom of the ocean. The air crushed out of his lungs by its relenting pressure. Now, after all this time, I could finally avenge his murder. 3 barely heard 9's words as his head swam with thoughts. Ace was 9's brother. She had known everything from the start. She had been biding her time, hiding her true intention from the moment they first met, always keeping a watchful eye for a suitable opportunity to arise, an opportunity to claim her vengeance. 3 stood there, dumbfounded, as though he had lost the ability to speak entirely. I see no need for you to sputter through an excuse, the overseer said, reading the shook clearly written across 3's face. We have all the facts we need. You will be purged from the organization. As per our rules, your partner 9 of Swords will now end your life. Hearing the overseer's words, 9 stepped forward. If you wish for assistance in this task, he said, turn to her, you will not be penalized. The reward will remain the same. The only condition is that you must be the one to deliver the final blow. Once you have eliminated him, your obligations will be clear, though I admit the idea of losing such talent pains me. The reward, the right to one's freedom, gained by uncovering and then executing a partner. Yeah, that freedom, they're not really getting freedom, even if they do this, I bet. Because I bet the overseer is going to kill her. I bet she already knows this. I bet she does. The reward, the right to one's freedom, gained by uncovering and then executing a partner who had betrayed the organization. The yearning for this freedom had dominated 3's existence for years. Now 9 would be the one to gain it in exchange for his life. Allow me the honor of doing it alone, she responded. I will avenge my brother's death with my own hands. What's crazy, I'm feeling like Nadia is going to turn the tables on the overseer, and it won't be S that would do it. Nadia's going, I'm not reading ahead, bro. It's just, Trails has this way of writing to where the unexpected always happens, bro. Like, they always turn the tables on some JoJo crud. Allow me the honor of doing it alone, she responded. I will avenge my brother's death with my own hands. She took another step forward, producing a number of poison needles from inside her bear. Without a moment's notice, hesitate, she launched them at 3. He instantly drew his sword, bowed the needles. out of the air. The combat tactic that had been drilled into him dictated he closed the distance between them, yet he didn't take so much as a single step. His parry was purely reflexive, programmed into his mind through years of combat. He had no intention of truly fighting back. Perhaps it was particularly because he didn't want to hurt her. More than anything, however, it was because he knew there was no point in resisting. Even if he did manage the best 9, he would need to take out the freaking Emperor afterward. And he knew that was a battle he had no chance of winning. 3 simply accepted his fate was to die there, and then there was nothing he could do to change it. 9 pulled out roughly twice as many needles as before, and again launched them at her former partner. In response, he automatically drew his sword and used both blades to swiftly deflect them. In 3's mind, the thought slowly began to sink in. This was his retribution for killing Ace. 9 leapt at him, closing in distance, and began attacking with an even greater intensity. They're doing all this for show, just like in the beginning chapter. This has to be nothing but a show. I just feel it. Someone like me, 3 thought, someone who slaughters a friend to preserve his own life doesn't deserve freedom. Someone like me doesn't even deserve to live. 9 continued her assault, attacking with both her needles and her thread. Were this an ordinary situation, there was no chance she would be a match for 3 in a close quarters fight. However, his heart was not in the battle, because a significant shift in the balance of power in the fight. Eventually, 9 managed to decisively gain the upper hand, successfully looping her threat around 3's neck. I'll die for her vengeance, he thought. Maybe that's the only outcome. They setting it up. Maybe that's the end I deserve. Sister legit about this. Dang. Oh, bro. Pairing her up with Sharon would be nuts. 9 that finally moved her fingers and the steel collar tightened around 3's neck. This is the end, she said in a flat, frigid tone. 3 knew what would happen next. He closed his eyes, choosing to await his end in silence. But the cold-breasted death did not come. Next chapter! Now her story. 9 of Swords. My mother died soon after I was born. From that point, it was just me, my older brother Ace, and our dad. As far back as I can remember, my dad was a monster. He took the mirror Mom left us and used it entirely for himself, spending each day drinking it away. He made no effort to put it to good use, to do anything that might help our family. And when he was in a bad mood, what little safe haven we had was violently wrestled away. Now, if he started abusing S and Ace, if not S, her and Ace, it would be nuts. My brother acted more like a parent to me than Dad ever did. Whether at home or out somewhere else, he always protected me. I really hated that house, but I always felt like it was unbearable when he was there by my side. Those days didn't last for long, however. I was still quite young when the household ran out of money and Dad decided to put us to work. There weren't many options for a child to earn much mirror. No, and even between my brother and I, our income barely made a scratch in the mounting debt. One day, my brother vanished, and Dad announced he had let him spread his wings. In other words, he had abandoned him. It was at that point that I stopped thinking of that monster as my family. Even in such an awful situation, I still held on the idea that my brother would come back to me one day. That meant my only option was to stay there until he did. 3 long years later, I finally received a letter from him. He wrote that he was in a miserable place. It had to be in the organization, but that he was managing to stay alive. I was able to send him a reply via the same method. Thrilled to have a connection with him. Once again, I eventually found out he was being forced to work as a killer for a shadowy society called the Organization. The thing he said he had to do were awful, inhuman. Just from reading his words, I could feel his pain as though it was my own. He said that the organization was nightmarishly strict, and that it was only thanks to his partner that he was able to send me letters in the first place, and that's S. My brother wrote a lot about his partner. So Ace didn't want to kill S. He was right there with Swin, S, 3 Swords, from the very beginning. He had his own motive. But what made Ace snap? My brother wore a lot about his partner, describing him as a true friend, almost like a younger brother. This was the only topic where I saw his writing soften, where he seemed happily. Naturally, I found myself wanting to meet this person, but that was impossible, and I knew it. I couldn't even meet with my own sibling, let alone his partner in some secret assassin cabal. We continued exchanging letters like this for some time, but I bet the Emperor knew this. I bet he looked at each of these letters as they were being sent out. But even that came to an end. I also ran out of mirror again, and I knew what was coming. I could tell it would soon be my turn to leave. I wrote my brother telling him as much. He wrote back telling me that he and his partner had decided to escape the organization. I could sense from his words just how resolved he was to do it. He followed his declaration with the promise to come for me, to get me out of that crud hole of a house. What followed, however, at the very end of the level was a grim note. If this escape somehow ends in failure, I'm going to prioritize my partner's life. The plays, bro. I'm going to prioritize my partner's life over my own. If it comes down to it, I'll sacrifice everything to make sure he at least gets out of here. You can trust him. If anything happens, you can rely on him to help. I told you, didn't I say it like in the beginning of that chapter? S made a promise to Ace, to this dude, to keep Nadia safe. He was, when it comes to trails, whenever they try to, like, I guess what, pay the attention to detail, S didn't, there was nobody else. But as S was telling his backstory, Ace was the only sucker in that story. So I was like, yeah, it had to have been that person. It had to have been Ace. It's crazy. What's crazy is I should have read this first, but I'm not going to cap. A lot of reading. A lot of lore. Like, this is what I be talking about. So much freaking lore is just thrown at you. But the way this lore is, it's like, it's not that hard to understand. It's easy to understand. It's just a lot of freaking reading, which is Trails in a nutshell. If this escape somehow ends in failure, I'm going to prioritize my partner's life over my own if it comes down to it. I sacrifice everything to make sure he at least gets out of here. You can trust him. If anything happens, you can rely on him to help. That was the last letter I ever received from him. In the end, he never came back for me, and our dad kicked me out. Just as I thought he would. He had become a slowly mess from the look of it. He had gotten himself addicted to some especially nasty substances. Sucker was doing meth. He was doing that crack. That the kind that tend to quickly drain one's finances. He was smoking that weed. I mean, I knew that they were destroying him physically as well, but I had stopped caring long ago. I was done with that disgusting scumbag I once called my dad. I used an intermediary to secure an opportunity to join the organization. It was right as I was entering training that I learned of my brother's death. I was told he was killed by his own partner. It was then my world began to fall apart. I threw myself headlong into my training, not thinking of anything else. I was distraught and trying to especially escape reality however I could. I ignored everyone around me, and even myself. I let my soul slip into hibernation and fully assume the role of one of the organization's tools. During the day, I would follow orders, not thinking for myself, but that night would come, and I had nothing to distract me. My mind would be tormented by thoughts of my brother's passing. The realization that I was now truly alone in the world shook me, as did the notion that my hands would soon be irreversibly stained with blood. Once the fear set in, there was no escaping it, and I gradually lost the ability to sleep properly. Dang. The body does have a limit, of course, and I eventually fall conscious for about an hour a night. 2, if I was really lucky, but it wasn't sleep, not really. It was far too shallow for me to physically and mentally recover much. And what little rest I did get was plagued with nightmares. Even after I had woken up, those bizarre, horrid sensations remained. A year passed like this with no improvement. Oh, crush, she was tormented. Despite that, I was able to graduate from the factory at an exceptionally fast pace. That was when I finally had a chance to meet him. The boy who had fought alongside my brother as his partner. He had just finished his own re-education, a consequence of betraying the organization. As fate would have it, We were assigned as partners. He was... Yeah. Makes sense. I thought S would at least get his friend, but I forgot. Because they tried to escape the organization together, and the way S was reinitiated, it was by him killing Ace. That's how he got reinitiated. I mean, he explained that earlier, but I had to remember that. He was the one who had stolen my brother from me, so I was resolved to despise him from the moment we met. I quietly kept a close eye on him, observing each and every one of his movements. Before long, though, something unexpected happened. Perhaps all of my pent-up fear and exhaustion had finally boiled over. Perhaps it was just my instincts telling me the truth I had been ignoring. Whatever the reason, one day we were out on a mission. I found myself able to sleep when I was next to him. I mean, actually sleep. Deeply and soundly for the first time in an entire year. There was something about his presence that gave me a sense of security. It wasn't unlike how I remembered feeling being next to my brother. She was in love, bro. When I woke up from this much needed rest, so many things came rushing back. Suddenly, without warning, I found myself bawling. As those tears came pouring out, the chains that sealed away my heart slowly began to loosen. I started feeling human again. I could feel my emotions for the first time in what felt like an eternity. As soon as he saw me crying, the boy quickly came over to console me. That just made me sob harder. I quickly discovered my new partner really was the person my brother wrote so fondly about. Blunt and a little awkward, but overly a deeply kind person and a very thoughtful partner. Despite being shackled to the organization and forced to kill for years, he had yet to fully surrender his humanity. He did seem to be bearing a great sorrow, one far more intense than anything my brother had described. I could tell he wasn't the kind of person capable of betraying, murdering a friend to ensure his own survival. Given my brother's letter, it wasn't hard to work out what had really happened. After making their escape, the two were backed into a corner and their prospects were grim. Rather than both of them being killed, it was better that at least one of them survived. The only way for that to happen was for one to kill the other, to gain forgiveness in the eyes of the organization. My brother knew his partner would reject the idea outright, and that even if he did accept it, he would insist on playing the part of the sacrifice. I was absolutely sure of that much. That's why my brother ended up feigning betrayal in order to get his partner to fight back and ultimately kill him. It was a plan that would spare his partner's life, but also would deeply scar him in only the way an unexpected betrayal could. From that point on, being near him was the only way I was able to feel secure enough to sleep. Dang, that's jacked up. And sleep I did. Every chance I got. Midday during our missions, if there was even the slightest opportunity, I was out like a light. After all, I needed to catch up on the year of rest I had been robbed of. It was truly a surprising turn of events, for me to say the least. I soon learned the boy was tormented by constant nightmares. I imagined the incident when my brother played a big role. There were so many moments where I saw how he was suffering and wanted to tell him the truth, but I would always stop myself at the last second, telling myself the time wasn't right. Our missions occasionally called for performances of a sort to deceive onlookers. It was always pretty terrible at it. It was hard to say why exactly that was, though. His movements were fine enough, as were his facial expressions. The factory emphasized all those things in his teaching, so he had received ample instruction there. It was just that he always seemed to overdo things or drastically underdo them, and it's because I bet he just doesn't feel human. He just feels like a killing machine, so that probably is the reason why. I wonder if it may have had something to do with the unshakable seriousness he always seemed to have about him. It could be a real problem sometimes, even to a point where he would become more of a liability than an asset. Any onlooker with half a brain would be able to tell something was less than genuine about his performance. I came to the conclusion he was just naturally bad deceiving others. That's why I had to keep my plans from him, to prevent his terrible poker face from giving us away, which is why she did all the crud in the previous chapter. He'd been earnestly working on his escape for a very long time. I, of course, understood the immense difficulty of his task and why he had to keep it to himself. Still, it made me a bit sad that he never spoke to me about it. He was in a precarious position, given that the organization still has doubt about him. I wasn't able to do anything to put him at risk, of course, but his shaky acting alone could very well have led to the organization seeing through his carefully laid scheme. If that happened, it would be the end. Bro, why is it already 2 hours that passed, bro? I swear. Dang. Of him, no question about it. The situation hadn't quite reached that point yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before it did. After a halberd barn mission had wrapped up, I went to make my report. The man I reported to had an aura unlike anything I've ever felt. He was the evil monster who managed the two of us. The organization overseer, the Emperor. He was the one forcing us to kill. His face was always obscured by a robe, but failed to mask the malice that overflowed from him. That day, he had a quiet, deadly exuberance about him like a hawk that locked onto its prey. There was no mistaking it. I knew he had caught on to my partner. He knew he intended to betray the organization again. I knew he would gleefully purge him when the time came, and that time was getting closer with each passing day. If that's how things were going to be, I told myself I would just have to get ahead of him, put my own plan into motion. The Emperor's... Pandora, yeah! What up, Pandora? Holy snot. That boom, holy snot. How you been, Pandora? I'm reading a story, a literal novel. They put the novel in the daggone Reverie, bro. They put the novel. If you want a good game series to sink your teeth into, Pandora, play The Legend of Heroes, bro. Well, there's certain games you have to play like in order to a certain extent, but if you want a good, deep JRPG experience after you beat Metaphor, The Legend of Heroes, bro. It's very good. Peak fiction, bro. Absolute freaking cinema, dog. I'm on the chapter. I'm reading one of the characters' story because they didn't actually get a game like everybody else. They literally put their story in like a novel type of beat. So that's where I'm at right now. Well, and I've been told the same thing from Overlord. Good. I corrupted him. Now he knows peak fiction. Now he knows. Because once you get onto this, you'll be like, holy snot. Hey, Sky is coming. I'll just say this, Pandora. If you don't believe me, play the Sky remake. The remake is the very beginning of Trails. That's all I'm saying. That's the best way for you to come in. The Sky remake. Because after that, you'll be like, if that doesn't get you, hey, we tried. That's it. Just, this lore is something. The gameplay already is real good. The gameplay itself. Dude, just know I'm going to be addicted if I start. It's there if you want to do it, Pandora. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, dog. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. This is legit one of my top 3 JRPGs. Persona is now number 3. Legend of Heroes is number 1. Kingdom Hearts maybe is 2. I love JRPGs. I'm just telling you, the same way I got Overlord into it, it's GG. It's no Honkai Star Rail BS, bro. You talking about a franchise that, bro, continues to evolve, bro. It's not going to be the same stale stuff every single, like, game, bro. It's always evolving. At least say that. But Sky, Pandora, unless you want to start early and do the OG. If you want to, go ahead. Or you can start with Cold Steel. Or you can start with, I think it's 0. You can start from there. Either way, once you play 1, it's over. That's all. That's it. Once you play 1, it's over. Because even Garnet, the Giga, he played Sky, and that was when he was just freaking gone, bro. He was like, I now understand everything. I'm gonna be going ham through every quest and maybe 100%. Yeah, trust me. The music, even though I feel like the OG music is good, the music, the character, that is like the best introduction into the Legend of Heroes. Because after what happened to that game, it will decide whether you're addicted, whether you want to go even further into the series or not. So I feel like that is your best bet. So if you're still thinking about it, Hold off for the remake. Then once the remake comes, you make your decision. What I'm reading right now is going over some characters in Reverie. Um, that gives me a better understanding of who they are. So in a way, it is spoiler for them, but by the time, because they're not really that many pictures, just like words or whatever, you're not gonna miss anything. So whatever you tend to do, it is. But I appreciate you for dropping by. Either way, you the GOAT. Add to the list of games to start a new playthrough. Dope. I'm happy. Hey, another sucker that joins the Trails family, bruh. I am so sorry. All right. Alright, so back to this. The situation had quite reached that point yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before it did. After a Hamdall Baron mission had wrapped up, I went to make my report. The man I reported to had aura unlike anything I've ever felt. He was the evil monster who managed the two of us. I just didn't beat Breath of the Wild first. Oh, you got light. I mean, if you do story and don't explore, you be down like, what, 20 hours? But the fun about Breath of the Wild is the exploration and just taking your time. That's why, like, when I played Breath of the Wild, I didn't try to beat it. I just tried to have as much fun in the world in which I could. So I just loafed around, just did whatever. That day, he had a quiet, deadly exuberance about him like a hawk that locked onto its prey. There was no mistaking it. I knew he had caught on to my partner. He knew he intended to betray the organization again. I knew he would gleefully purge him when the time came, and that time was getting closer with each passing day. If that's how things were going to be, I would just have to get ahead of him and put my own plan into motion. The Emperor's intentions were obvious. Where the cruel history my partner and I are shared, he had made us partners in a bid to slowly push me towards revenge. He knew I'd eventually break and sell my partner out, forcing him to go through another bitter betrayal. The Emperor was looking forward to watching it all unfold. We're both tools in the organization and the personal plaything of the Emperor's. Yeah, that sounds good, Pandora. Exploration? Yeah. I promise you, that's the best way to play Breath of the Wild. Not trying to beat it, but to enjoy the ambience, that the game presents. That this is the game that spurned, like, a lot of open world, like, JRPGs. But Breath of the Wild just had that type of, like, touch grass that not a lot of other games are able to even do, So that's why I definitely, like, emphasize just taking your time with the game, I want to expand my inventory slot. Yeah, that'll do it too. So I decided to give him exactly what he wanted to see. Once I finished my mission report, I told the Emperor my partner's intent to betray the organization. I then shared my plan to lure him to a specific place, where I would then eliminate him. I gave him a detailed explanation, making it as enticing as possible for the Emperor. It was easy enough to gain his consent. Even with his face hidden under his cowl, he could hardly contain the excitement in his voice over the coming slaughter. The laugh that escaped his throat was a sound so vile it still haunts me to this day. Later that evening, my partner arrived at the designated location, the base of a hill in the mountains. First, he was horribly shaken by the realization that he had been betrayed again. When he learned who my brother was, though his face changed, I watched his surprise turn to despair, which in turn shifted to absolute acceptance of his fate. To call what I saw heart-wrenching didn't do it justice. I focused my efforts on giving him the most vicious glare possible, one equal mocking and murderous. I came up with the foulest, most malicious thing I could bear to say, trying to cut to his very core. After all, the Emperor was standing right next to me, and if I was to be convincing, I couldn't afford even the slightest hesitation. I stepped forward. I was going to eliminate him. I shifted closer to my partner in order to facilitate my threat attacks, or so I made it appear. My true objective was to put some distance between myself and the Emperor. Once I had my thread around his neck, that battle was as good as over. From there, I knew I could end his life with a flick of a finger. This is the end. I meant those words from the bottom of my heart. A transparent cord ran through the center of the web of thread under my control. Manipulating this cord allowed me to set off a chain reaction that twisted it into a complex spiral shape I will often use to trap distant foes during missions. Fully focused on watching his toys and throes of bloodthirsty vengeance, it was the Emperor who had relaxed his guard the most. Right at the climax of our battle, I seized the opportunity, and with perfect timing, I was able to ensnare the unwitting emperor, leaving him shackled and immobile. The key was the transparent cord. I may not have had the same cutting power as steel thread, but it was more than twice as strong. Even so, I couldn't count on it to hold the Emperor for long. While moments delay, I summoned all my strength to pull on another cord. A low rumble sounded out, and a section of the rocky hill collapsed, dropping a torrent of rubble below. I had taken my time to find the perfect location, one with brittle bedrock that I could break away on cue. The stones roared and tumbled in a huge wave, hurling down towards the Emperor. In the middle of all was a giant boulder, more than 10 yards across. Time seemed to slow as it fell directly at the Emperor's head. The thunder of the rock slide drowning out all other sound. Finally, all came crashing down. The aftermath looked as though a catastrophic earthquake had just taken place. The Emperor had taken a direct hit from a massive boulder. There was no way he could have survived that. Even if he somehow had, he was now buried alive. My partner looked on in confusion, still processing what had just happened. S. I cried out, finally able to use the name I preferred to call him by. I ran over to him and buried my head in his chest. This was where I felt the most safe, by his side. I nuzzled up against him, holding him tight, never wanting to let him go. I had never hugged him before then. I had always been too afraid to do so. I'm so sorry. I said those horrible things. So I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth. There was so much more to explain, but there were the things I wanted to say to him most. Even though he was still reeling from everything that had just happened, he was still kind enough to hold me close and try to calm me down. 9, what in the world? Before he could finish the sentence, something I never predicted happened. The small mountain of fallen rubble, rocks, boulders shifted slightly. The Emperor's on another level, bro. Of course he is. Pebbles began to rise up into the air. It was slow but unmistakable. What's happening? Dumbfounded, all we could do was look on in confusion. Is this some kind of space element art? There's no way I mused aloud. No, that didn't seem right. Perhaps it was some kind of device that functioned the same way as an airship's anti-gravity components. I didn't understand what was happening. I just sat there, staring blankly, my mind racing for an explanation before I could reach one. However, my partner spoke, his voice steeped in panic. That still oversees the Emperor's power! But that would meant the Emperor was still alive. More and more rocks began floating upward, taking their place among the ever-increasing collection, gently balanced in the air. 9, we need to move. I continued to sit there, absolutely at a loss on what to think. 3 grabbed my hand and we set off at a sprint. We were able to cover a good amount of distance before we heard what sounded like a massive explosion behind us. We turned to see boulders and rocks of all sizes being flung upward into the sky. Sucker said planetary devastation. Too big for rain. Like a volcano erupting before our eyes. To be continued. Tears and promises. Oh wow, this is short. Wow. 3 and 9 ducked into a mountain cave on the outskirts of Luzent. They had fled from the Emperor as fast as their legs could carry them, and were now completely out of breath. As they sat there, 9 told 3 everything she had kept from him up till then. She told him about Ace, about herself, the details of her plan, finally what Ace's true intentions were on that night 3 years ago. At the start, 3 occasionally chimed in or asked questions, but as the conversation went on, he fell silent. By the end, his head was hung so low that 9 couldn't see his expression. He had been utterly convinced that his friend, his one true friend, had betrayed him, when in reality, Ace had sacrificed his life to ensure 3 would survive. And as thanks for that incredibly selfless act, 3 had not only killed him, but had spent the past 3 years despising his memory. Then came his sister, risking her life to save her brother's killer. 3 felt his chest tighten up as a wild mix of emotions ran through his head, threatening to overpower him. He was grateful for being fortunate enough to have 2 people in his life, Ace and 9, who he could fully trust. At the same time, he felt a bottomless well of anger burst up. Anger at himself, the pathetic excuse for a human being. Bruh, it gets worse, bruh. It's about to get even more crazy. Because would you believe that this is a legit novel? This is nowhere in the game, bro. They legit made their story a novel. That's what's crazy. Battered by his storm of emotion. Like, if you don't read this, you basically do not understand who they are in the game. Like, legit. Because the way the game shows them is just like, oh, okay, these are just two kids. And then you find out, oh, if you played everything else before, you know, oh, these kids are not to be trifled with, bro. These kids are nothing to be trifled with. So I'm just like, oh. So in the previous stream, like, there was an act that had just happened. And everything that happened in that previous chapter, I was just like, now it all makes sense. Now it all makes sense. Now it makes sense why when they saw him, everything like shook within them. But I'm not gonna cap. I'm glad I'm reading this now, because after how they concluded that act, oh my gosh, biggest cliffhanger an act could have thrown at me. So I know when I play Act 4 tonight, when I'm done reading all this, it's gonna hit like a truck, because we're going after our main sucker. Like the main sucker of how everything is. And what's crazy is this is only Act 4 I'm at. There's 16 acts. 16. Trying to tell 3 stories in one game. On some Sonic 06 level of crud. I'm fine, he said. Return to his usual blunt tone. Is there anything I can do to make you feel better? 9 acts. I said I'm fine. Despite his words. 3's head still hung low. You're an awful actor, but you're even worse liar when you're not performing. You know that? 3 sunk down to his knees. 9 moved over to him, taking his head in her hands. She began gently ruffling his hair like a mother comforting a child. Everything's okay, she murmured gently. It's all okay, but I 3 stammered, his voice, but I stammered, his voice growing weak and hoarse. The last was a 3 facade broke. Overwhelmed by 9's kindness, and he relented at last. 9 was younger than 3, definitely looked the part, but you know how women are, they mature quick. Dang, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. That moment she showed an almost motherly level of understanding and compassion. For someone like 3 who grew up without that warmth, it was his first time being comforted by someone, his first time feeling the warmth of family. I know how strong you had to be, S. I know how hard it's been for so long, but it's okay now, I promise. No longer able to hold his emotions back, he finally broke down. A lifetime's worth of tears came flooding out of his eyes all at once. I'm such a wretched excuse for, he sobbed, no longer able to control his voice in the slightest. Hot tears poured down his cheeks, staining the cool floor. Dang, sucker sobbed! That's not true. That's all. This dude was initiated into this organization at 7. He's now, what, I think 10. And he was being turned into a tool for assassination for this organization. And if he and her had went against the organization to try to get out, they would kill him on sight or get rid of them on sight. Only way you will get your freedom is if you get rid of your partner or you die. That's basically it. That's basically it. That's the organization which they're in. And in the previous chapter, they legit tried to kill their superior. That's what happened. That's why it's just like, holy snot. And now they're on the run. But usually what happens when these suckers go on the run, no matter where they turn, someone's going to be out to get rid of them. That's their story as of now. 9 said softly, continuing to run her fingers through his hair. Why am I still alive? Why isn't Ace here? He weakly slammed his fist against the ground in frustration. Now another word of that, I won't hear it. You're the one who's been there for me the past few years. You, S, but it's because of me that Ace. Listen, that just means you need to fight twice as hard. You're living for him too now. Three's words failed him as he was overtaken by sobbing. His years of pain and suffering pouring out of him. After some time, 3 was able to calm himself down, somewhere regain his composure. I'm here for you, so you don't have to cry. 9 told him, but if you ever want to, then that's okay too. So which is it then? 3 retorted, his detached demeanor creeping back. He suddenly became aware of the fact that he was in her arms and hurriedly pulled away, immediately shifting the conversation back towards exchanging information and attempt to mask his sudden embarrassment. They finished catching up and turned their attention to their current predicament. So the overseer figured me out. You know, I was going to try and make a run for it. And that's why you moved to strike first in order to outmaneuver him. 3 thought out loud. That's right. I've been watching the whole time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to take him down. I wish you told me beforehand and let you spoil the element of surprise with your awful acting skills. 9 gave a worried grin. Yeah, I don't think so. 3's face scrunched up a bit. Both 9 and the Emperor had caught on to his plan, so there was a little room to defend himself in that regard. I chose the moment he'll be the most distracted, 9 continued, switching to a serious expression. My timing was perfect and my preparations were more than enough. Despite all that, despite everything, despite being buried under a pile of massive boulders, the Emperor was still very much alive. No matter how much she thought, 9 simply couldn't figure out how it was possible. It's likely his power at work, 3 said. He had said the same thing earlier, right as they took off running. What exactly is his power, 9 asked. I'm fairly certain he could control gravity somehow, 3 said. He did something similar with Ace and I fought him 3 years ago. 3 wrenched open a bitter, painful memory, began relaying what he remembered to 9. He and Ace had been able to fend off the first 2 pair of assailants set after them by the organization, but then they had to come face to face with the Emperor. Even with the element of surprise on their side, even when they coordinated their attack perfectly, they proved exceptionally difficult. They found their bodies heavy and clumsy. Oh shoot. Ooh, that makes sense now. And their movements lacked precision and skill. The Emperor, on the other hand, was nimble as could be, almost inhumanly so, and the 2 were quickly overpowered. So what do you think? 3 looked at 9, awaiting her input. There was no sign of him starting any cast or charge up, so that was using arms, she said, her brow furrowed in thought. As for a portable gravity manipulation device, small enough for a single person to carry and conceal, well, given to modern technology, it's seriously hard to imagine. He might have an artifact or something like it. An avalanche couldn't kill him, and he has enough precise control to be able to move individual stones and boulders. 9 scratched her head in frustration. This sucks. We really don't have a lot to go on here. She paused, thinking a moment more, and then continued. In any case, unless something major changes, he's too powerful for us. Any attempt at a direct attack is going to result in our deaths. They fell silent for a time until 3 spoke up, a grave expression on his face. If the time comes when we have to choose, we're going to prioritize your life, 9. You need to be the one to kill. Stop it! 9 silenced 3 with outbursts of pure emotion, far more raw than her usual self. But then at least you'll be able to. If you die, I'm going right after you, she shouted. I'll do it myself if I have to. The calm motherly figure from before was nowhere to be seen. 9 was in a frenzy now, almost like a child throwing a tantrum, regardless of her tone. However, her words were heartfelt and earnest. I can't go back to not being able to sleep. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I can't go back to being alone. The way of her feelings was clear to 3. Seeing this, he allowed a short sigh. Then you have my word. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. That's not what I'm asking for. Okay, you're right, 3 said, taking a deep breath. Then I promise that we'll survive this. We'll get through it together. 9 looked at 3 with imploring, almost pleading eyes. You swear? I swear, he said. Now, if we're going to have any chance at all, we'll need to do everything perfectly. The rock slide was massive enough that despite the fact that he survived it, it was hard to imagine the Emperor was completely unscathed. If they tried to flee now, the organization would quickly find them again, and they would have to contend with the Emperor at full strength. The pair knew if they were going to make a move, now was the time. Let's do it then. We'll take him out. Holy snot. What's going to be crazy is his name is Emperor based off of the Arcana. So if that's the case, right, the major Arcana, their names, 3 swords based off of 3 swords and 9 swords based off of the minor Arcana. So even if they take him out, it don't mean jack. Because there are other suckers from the Arcana ready to go after them. This is going to be nuts. Because that's why I want to read this now. Because if this dude is part of the Arcana, then that means there are going to be other suckers that are going to take his place and go after these two. Oh, he's finally revealed. Gravity and artifacts. 309 returned to the hill, more accurately where the hill used to be. It was now completely unrecognizable. A sizable chunk of it was gone. Had been screwed about the area in the form of countless bits of rubble. They must stood right where they had left. Wow! Seemingly unfazed, 309 surmised he has to stand at least some manner of injury. Nothing major, but his ever-present robe, under which he had hidden his face, had been reduced to little more than a shredded cape. Underneath, he wore a gold helmet bearing a crown design. In his hand, he carried a golden scepter with a spherical tip, and his body was covered in golden armor. The raw sentience was insufficient to describe his heavenly gilded countenance. Everything about him suggested both needless grandeur and wicked condescension. I knew you would return. You two aren't complete fools. After all, the Emperor called out to them. 3 and 9 remained silent as they slowly approached. So have you decided which of you two will gain the organization's forgiveness? 3 and 9 turned to each other and nodded. 3 removed his hand from his sword, leaving it sheathed. 3 knelt down and closed his eyes, showing Scepter what's to come in response. 9 pulled out some of her poison needles, silently launched them at 3's neck, or at least that's how she made it appear. The last second before the needles parted from her fingers, she definitely altered their trajectory, sending them speeding towards the Emperor instead. The envenomed projectiles whizzed perfectly through the air as ever. However, as they neared their intended target, they suddenly curved downward, sharply, plummeting harmlessly to the ground. Dude manipulates gravity. Very well. I hear your answer loud and clear. The Emperor proclaimed, looking up at the pair. You both wish to die today. Not a chance, 9 called out, throwing another volley of needles directly at the Emperor. Their trajectory suddenly shifted again, this time upward. She's using analysis now. She's trying to figure out the dude's weakness. From his kneeling position, 3 quickly shifted his stance and pushed forward off the ground with all the power he could muster in his legs. He launched himself at the Emperor, breaking in a full-on charge. We've had enough. You're the one meeting their death today. 3 began slashing away at the target with incredible speed. His lightning-quick strikes grew slow and sluggish as soon as they neared the Emperor. Zawaldo! However, with his assailant's speed so drastically curbed, the man was able to use his golden scepter to effortlessly bat aside the boy's assault. In the same instant, 9-second set of needles changed direction mid-air, the man falling straight toward the Emperor. She had managed to calculate the range of the gravitational field with just a single throw. Once she understood its effect on projectiles, she was able to revise her trajectory. Moreover, she had factored in the increased acceleration from the higher gravity, meaning her needles would hit harder than normal. Despite all that, however, her attack was neutralized by a flick of the Emperor's gilded arm. It was still not enough to penetrate his armor. It was, however, more than sufficient to arouse his ire. You dare defy me? Me? Livid, he swung his scepter downward. 3 immediately reacted, just barely managing to block the attack with his sword. Even so, the impact alone threw him back several arcs. 3 could feel his brain rattle in his skull from the force of the blow. There was no way the Emperor's physical strength and the weight of his scepter alone could do that. It occurred to 3 that there must have been another way he was able to manipulate gravity. You will be purged, the Emperor said in a low growl. The same words 3 had heard say a few hours ago. And 3 years ago, when the Emperor spoke like this, it was nothing less than the arbitration of a death sentence. At the sound of those words, past memories bubbled up in 3's mind, and an old terror began to grip him. His legs grew wobbly, and he started to stagger. Once glanced back at 9 was all it took for him to restore his resolve. He froze himself back on his feet, reflexively snapping into a fighting stance, and 9 continued to provide cover fire with her needles as he resumed his assault. Their approach proved no more fruitful than before. Even so, as 3 continued to fight under such grueling conditions. One sec. Alright, we good. I'm not sick. I'm getting over a sickness. The way his muscles intuitively reacted, the angle and speed at which he swung his swords, he was slowly chipping away at the Emperor's overwhelming advantage. Though 3 may not have enjoyed the same powers of insight his partner possessed, his skill in close quarters combat were elite by even the most exacting of standards. For her part, 9 covered. Speaking for our minute, bro, it's been 2 hours, dog. Non-stop, 2 hours. Going through all of this, dog. It's good. Good reading, bro. Good freaking reading. Some of the, and I don't read that much, but dog, it's good. She had instead begun aiming for gaps between its pieces. It was an incredibly difficult task, but as she grew more accustomed to the disrupting effects of the gravitational field, she was gradually getting closer. She began weaving in offensive arts along with her volleys of needles in order to keep the Emperor on her toes. Her attacks appeared simple enough for her foe to deal with, but they still managed to pull his attention away from 3, even if only for a minute. The fight raged on, and after a bit of time, 3 and 9 appeared to have finally begun gaining the upper hand, yet the Emperor did not seem fazed in the slightest. His expression was unreadable beneath the shrouds of his helmet, but it was clear from his body language he still believed himself fully in control of the situation. 3 managed to land the occasional strike, but even his sword seemed to do little against the Emperor's imposingly resilient armor. In an attempt to land a heavier blow, 3 launched himself into the air intently to let the gravity carry his swords downward as 9's needles had. However, he found himself soaring up higher than he had intended, supposedly so, as though he had suddenly sprouted wings. His mark completely missed. He lost his sense of balance and began tumbling through the air. He quickly realized it could only have been due to more of his foe's trickery. Reduced gravity? Expertly seizing the opportunity, the Emperor raised his scepter overhead and swiftly swung it downward, as if mimicking this motion. 3 suddenly dropped out of the air, thrown to the hard ground below like a rag doll. The air knocked out of his lungs. Then 3 struggled to catch his breath, spitting out mouthfuls of blood in between gaps. Get out of the way, he's not done. Saved by 9's frantic warning, 3 just barely managed to roll out of the way. A split second later, the scepter slammed down into the ground where it had just begun. As the gravity enhanced scepter connected with the rocky ground below, it allowed a powerful blast, leaving a crater in its wake. The resulting shockwave launched 3 to the side, knocking him to relative safety. Had he taken a direct hit, it would have been completely pulverized. Though dazed, he was still aware enough to signal to 9 that he was okay. He forced himself to his feet. The battle completely changed. The Emperor had begun manipulating gravity levels on a constant cycle, and 3 was forced into a defensive position. Whenever he managed to get a handle on his foe's barrage of attacks, he found the gravity level alter yet again, forcing him to start back at 0. It was impossible for him to fight in such ever-changing conditions. The situation was taxing for 9 as well. She found herself forced to constantly recalculate the field's range and gravity values, severely reducing the number of effective attacks she was able to launch. Despite their bleak outlook, the 2 of them continued to hold out even when pressured. 3 served as an excellent vanguard, consistently denying the Emperor any opportunity for a decisive strike. 9 meanwhile continued to back him up flawlessly, acting with surgical precision that ensured no opening went to waste. She called out to him as he leapt back, putting some distance between himself and the Emperor. I think I figured something out. Let's hear it. 3 waited for her to continue, keeping his guard up and watching closely for any sign of attack from the Emperor. Have you noticed anything different from when you and Ace fought him before? Was he carrying anything in his left hand back then? 3 glanced at his foe's left hand, seeing it empty. He thought back to 3 years ago. Now that you mention it, I'm pretty sure he had an orb with him, purple, with the golden scepter of a crow on it. The bow back then was completely one side, just as I suspected. 9 nodded. 3 had also sensed something was different, but someone chalked it up to Emperor toying with them, as he didn't consider them to be a true threat to him. Factoring in what 9 just pointed out, however, cast things in a much different light. Also, you realize the Emperor paused his onslaught, his own recognition of 9's keen observation. You see the implements he has on him now. I suspect at one point he had 4 different artifacts that let him control gravity. 4, huh? 3 said, taking note of the Emperor's equipment. Right, a helmet with the crown motif that can increase or reduce the overall level of gravity. Armor that absorbs the force imparted by attacks the moment they are received. A scepter that sends out a devastating gravitational wave when it makes contact with its target, and an orb with the crow perched on it that allows its wielder to alter gravity on a target-by-target basis. Nine paused her explanation for a moment as she looked defiantly at the Emperor. The reason he had worn that tattered cloak was now clear. If someone were to wield so many artifacts once as he did, it would be necessary to conceal them. Failure to do so would surely attract unwanted attention from the church. Now that you mention it, this time around, he hasn't been moving faster while slowing us down at the same time. 3 said, when we fought him before, we couldn't even touch him. It was true that in their fight against him, 3 and Ace had been struggling under different levels of gravity than the Emperor. There was no doubt he was toying with them in the present, but at the very least, both sides were battling under the same levels of gravity, constantly shifting. Though they were, as such, the pair odds of winning were much better this time around. I think he either lost the orb at some point or it was destroyed or at least damaged in the rock slide. 9 explained. Pair realized that if this was true, now was their best chance to take down the Emperor once and for all. A talented tool indeed. The Emperor's voice was low, tinged with a hint of perverse delight. The artifacts I wear are collectively known as the Monarch's Regalia. I'm impressed you were able to analyze their capabilities in such a limited amount of time. You, 9 of swords, are truly astounding. I don't want your praise, you freak. Ignoring 9's retort, the Emperor continued on his exhilaration, giving way to a violent savagery. But even the greatest tool is worthless if it will not submit to his rightful place in my hands. His body began levitating broken chunks of earth underfoot, rising upward with him. With all the force he could muster, he swung his scepter into a nearby boulder, and worthless tools will be disposed of. And the boulder shattered into shards of all shapes and sizes that were set rocketing towards 9. Watch out, 3 cried out. The shards flew like a salvo of bullets from 1,000 different guns, all of them pointing directly at one target. It was a grim sight, not unlike a single soldier standing before the assault of an entire army. Panicked, 3 rushed into a line of fire. He brandished his sword and did everything he could to prevent the shards from reaching 9. Flanked and broke what he could, using his body as a shield for the rest, but there was a considerable distance between him and 9. 1 he could not cover easily. By the time he had leapt in the way, a great many shards were already too far ahead. 3 was too late. 9 had no realistic chance of avoiding the entirety of the attack, and instead of her efforts simply avoiding the worst of the piece of stone flying at her. There were far too many, however, and 1 managed to slip through her defenses. She suffered a direct hit to the abdomen, and a red mist sprayed from her mouth as she crumbled to the earth. A red mist. Anger and analysis. 9! 3 ran over to her, his voice hoarse with agony and grief. Her forehead, hands, legs, her entire body was stained with blood, dripping from 1,000 scratches and cuts. It was a fate far too cruel for such a girl. No matter how many times 3 called out to her, she didn't respond. He had sworn to protect her. He had promised himself, promised her. But now, 3 felt himself overcome by shame and regret. I'm too weak, he thought to himself. Too weak to help anyone. Too weak to save anyone. As if to seize upon his distress, the Emperor spoke once more. So one of you made it. Now be wise and stop this here. Deliver the final blow and be spared just as you did before. At those words, 3 felt a creaking in his mind. It was harsh, like the sound of metal scraping against metal. Surely a girl like her would derive a wasted satisfaction for being killed by the same one who took her brother. The Emperor's mouth twisted into a perverse smile. The depravity in his eyes clear, even though the shadow cast by his helmet. It was then that something snapped inside 3. Die! He exploded, as if the boundless rage coursing through his veins had at least found an outlet. His legs and arms snapped into operation. A primal rubble burst from his throat. His bones creaked and his blood boiled. Pure fury ignited his entire body, inciting it to action. And before he knew it, he had launched himself at the Emperor. He unleashed a whirlwind of attacks. His strikes faster and more powerful than ever before. The Emperor met the charge head on, altering gravity as he went about. as he went, but 3 adapted to each shift almost as fast as they came. His body was running on pure instinct, honing his senses to a razor sharp edge, giving him almost preternatural adaptability. The Emperor, on the other hand, found himself working harder and harder to handle 3's hail of blows. He managed to block the oncoming strikes, but his attacker showed no sign of slowing down. Like a wild dog, the Emperor sneered. A tool with a will of its own is useless thing, to be sure, but seeing you foaming at the mouth like this is pathetic beyond measure. You truly are fated to die as you live, a mere thing. Even in the face of 3's enraged onslaught, Emperor had hardly taken any damage at all. He still held all the cards. There was little more than annoyance, like a flea biting a wolf. 3's thoughts bubbled back up to the surface. He found himself remembering something Nadia said. It was his natural sense of composure that allowed him to recall such a timely memory. Composure he did not possess 3 years ago. He continued to allow his anger drive his body, but maintained a calm mind, not allowing his thoughts to slip away in his rage. He could have stopped himself at any time, but he found his rage beneficial and wielded it admirably, as though it was simply another weapon available to him. 3 himself was unaware of this, but such an ability not only control one's emotions, but turn them into power, was rare indeed. It was a skill that did not come easily to even the greatest warriors. Yet 3 had managed to master such a complicated concept at his young age. Armor that absorbs the force imparted by attacks the moment they're received. That was how Nadia described the Emperor's armor. Sure enough, just as she described, no matter how many strikes 3 launched, nothing seemed to get through. It was then that realization dawned on him. If the armor was immune to external force, then what he needed to do was induce internal force. Anyone else may have given up at this point, but 3 could scarcely imagine a more suitable target for his unique skills. He combined his blades into one, squaring off against the Emperor. Oh, so he's using Mark. He's using Mark, and then he's going to hit him with Revelation. The defining characteristic of 3's weapons was their ability to eternally induce an art-based explosion in their target. To do so, he needed to strike the same point with each blade separately, and then a third time, and then in their fused form. By this point, he had already landed a number of hits on the Emperor's armor, and luckily for 3, a decent amount of those hits overlapped. All that remained was the final step in the process, making contact with those intersecting points using his fused sword. 3 attacked the Emperor with the same rage and power as before. This time, though, he failed to land a single hit. He was just a hair's breadth off every single time. The first step in his weapons process was relatively simple. He simply needed to land a strike with each weapon, create 2 perpendicular lines that would paint a target for the ornament. The next part, however, was far more difficult. He needed to use the fused blade to hit the precise point where the 2 lines intersect. This was a much smaller target area, making the task that much more demanding. Still, 3 was confident in his aim and knew he had the dexterity to pull it off. In spite of his skill, confidence, however, he continually found himself failing to land the decisive hit. The Emperor cackled in delight as he watched 3 struggle to him. 3's reply was nothing short of pure comedy. I know my tools are sided out, he said. A dark grin spreading across his face. Your method of attack, how your weapons work. I understand these things even better than you. As if proving the Emperor's point, 3's next attack fell short as well. The Emperor launched a counterattack with his staff, swung at the perfect angle. 3 had figured out his foe's tricks. Right before each of his attacks would land, the Emperor would make a subtle change to gravity. His timing was exquisite, and the trick was executed in such a way that 3 had no time to correct the angle of his sword. Further, the gravity wave emitted by the Emperor's scepter did nothing at all when it failed to connect. But if it did, the resulting damage would be enormous. Thus far, 3 had been able to evade or turn away each incoming swing, but he knew it was only because the Emperor was allowing it. He had yet to land a single effective attack, and the wear on both his weapon and his own body was steadily mounting. The outcome of the battle seemed clear, and by all appearances, there was nothing that could change his course. Thanks to his impeccable defense, the Emperor was nearly unscathed, whereas 3 was barely hanging on, looking more and more like he could collapse at any moment. In between clashes, a momentary calm stole over the battlefield. 3 was weighing his options. Voice broke the silence. It was a lazy draw, one that 3 had heard many times over the past year. Analysis complete. Bro, 9 is on some Shikamaru crud, bro. You've been playing into my hands the whole time. 9 struggled to her feet, looking as though she could fall back down at any moment. How? The Emperor's genuine shock escaped his mouth in a low hiss. Nine, you're okay, 3 exclaimed. Once he understood what had happened, Nine had fallen unconscious. She had simply feigned doing so in order to analyze the Emperor in secret. She had given 3 no indication of her plan whatsoever, which is, she's just that good, bro. She had given 3 no indication of her plan whatsoever. After all, had she done so, the Emperor may very well call on to her plan. Just fine, she responded. I used my thread to cushion the blow of the boulder by shredding them into smaller pieces. In the end, the rocks barely scratched me. Judging by the amount of blood that covered her, it would have been clear to anyone that was far from the truth. But the fact remained that she was both alive and conscious. 3 designated from the Emperor and moved closer to Nine, making sure to keep his eyes trained on his phone as he did so. There's a moment where he's unable to respond to anything. She explained. That's his power, fate, or weakness. What do you mean? It's gravitational manipulation doesn't require casting, like an art would. But after you use it, there's a period of time. Bro, on some pain crud. Almighty push! Before he's able to use it again. That's why he was able to immediately prevent the falling rocks from burying him earlier. But the way he's changing gravity is so precise, 3 said. Thinking back on the bow, how could he have managed that? He was just reading your movement, S. He knows how you fight, like the back of his hand. Wait, what? 3 exclaimed. The surprise in his voice clear. It's true, 9 responded. The way he manipulates gravity is determined before you even start your swings. He knows you well enough to predict everything you'll do. Is that even possible? 3 is mind racing. Sure is, 9 continued. And he's not using an artifact for it either. His mind just works that quickly. He's a total monster through and through. Emperor allowed a low chuckle. A sound analysis will reveal you nothing. I know your techniques inside and out. The same speed, the same power, the same angles, each and every time. There is no possible way you can undo years of the habits. We so painstakingly are dead to you, S. Nine looked up at him knowingly. Right, he acknowledged. Let's end this. The dude nodded in agreement, turned to face the Emperor once more. 3 charged at him, renewing his previous assault. He raised the swords over his head, attacking at a high angle. Emperor dodged effortlessly and set forth a counterattack. Their deadly dance continued as before, as things were. Both sides knew it would ultimately lead. The Emperor sensed an incoming attack and prepared to manipulate gravity. As he predicted, 3 attacked a half step faster, aiming for one of the spots in his armor that previously marked. As the swords raced towards its target, gravity shifted and the sword's trajectory was altered. Despite this, it somehow continued on its original path, regardless, as if the altered gravity had been predicted and compensated for. Impossible! The Emperor muttered under his breath. He hastily jerked his body out of the blade's trajectory, with hardly a second to spare. 3's movements had changed somehow, as the Emperor mulled the changing situation over. 3's next attack came speedy in. The Emperor again predicted the speed and trajectory and manipulated gravity accordingly. However, boom! A muffled explosion rang out and the Emperor fell. His armor cracked and pain coursed through his left arm. What? Another flash. Boom! His right leg was now damaged as well. The Emperor was at an utter loss. Had 3 managed to correctly predict his spatial manipulation? How was he? 9. Analysis complete. Suddenly able to alter his strikes to compensate for the gravity. Had the analyzer been analyzed himself? Cursing 3's day, the Emperor's thoughts grew frantic. As he desperately looked around for a clue, he realized what was actually happening. He glimpsed a number of barely visible cords extending from 3's body. Naturally, 9 stood at the other end, controlling them. She wasn't pulling him to and fro like a marionette, but was instead nudging his attack slightly, guiding his direction, timing, and angle to create the perfect strike. The Emperor may have been predicting 3's attacks and making adjustments, but 9 was doing the same to him in turn. It was her guidance that allowed 3 to score direct hit after direct hit. Her superior intellect was, of course, a major reason why this was possible, but her relationship with 3 was their true secret weapon. The 2 knew each other better than anyone in the world, which allowed her to predict his reactions and movements with incredible accuracy. She used her natural understanding of her partner to help him adapt his combat style fit the situation at hand. In that sense, the secret behind the upper hand they had suddenly gained was as simple as could be. So cool, bro. You little wrench. You little wench. The Emperor loud and enraged growl, laced with bitter hatred. Neither 3 nor 9 had ever seen him like this before. He tried to launch the same rock onslaught at 9 that he had before, but he found himself murdered of munitions. He could not be sure when it happened, but at some point the duo had led him to a different part of the area. One where he could no longer weaponize the terrain. Furious bloodlust, he lowered the gravity near him and rushed at 9. Finally, she smirked. I've been waiting. A giant boulder appeared in the air above the Emperor, likely due to an art 9 had cast. The Emperor was unimpressed, however, at being subject to the same attack twice. Tabarao even lacked the element of surprise. He easily shattered the encroaching boulder with his staff once it entered his area of reduced gravity, but it was the flippant display of arrogance that sealed his fate. As a piece of the boulder rained down around him, he found himself face to face with a plush toy rabbit, one that had been hidden within the boulder. No, he exclaimed, knowing full well it was no mere toy. His realization came too late. However, with a massive bang, the rabbit detonated. Light and heat washed over the Emperor, and his legs buckled under the force. Just that another explosion went off at his back. 3 had landed a solid hit on his chest armor, and the resulting blast had blown it clear off his body. This is the end, 3 said quietly. The black-hearted Emperor armor had been destroyed, and 3's blade had found its bloody mark. Final chapter. S and N. The Emperor had fallen to his knees, 3's sword protruding from his chest. He looked up at the sky and gave a dry, bitter laugh. Found some humor in your end, have you? Asked 3. To think you two would best me, the Emperor said. He looked up at the sky. Think you two would best me, the Emperor said. His voice weak. I admit it, I underestimated you. 1 second. I have to answer it later. Found some humor in your end, have you? Acts 3. To think you two would best me, the Emperor said, his voice weak. I admit it, I underestimate you. You are by far the most masterful tools I've ever had the pleasure of owning. Enough. We're not your tools anymore, 3 said, gripping his sword, preparing himself to silence the Emperor forever. So he thought to himself, the moment to kill had come yet again. The thought he hated most. The thing he would never grow accustomed to. Things were different this time, given that the man who stole away some humanity in the first place now sat at the end of his sword. But that didn't stop 3's head from trembling. S. 9 said gently, moving closer. We'll do it together, okay? Her typically light and relaxed expression was now serious and sincere. Okay, 3 responded. This was it, the moment where the two would put their tragic past to rest. 9 placed her hands on 3's. Dang. Steadying his weapon, her warmth abated his trembling ever so slightly. They moved to raise the sword together. In response, the Emperor spoke once more. Every arch of your path thus far has been stained with blood, just as the rest of your lives shall be. Your fates are immutable. Kill or be killed, control or be controlled. You will end up no different than I. We will ever be one and the same. You're wrong, said 9. We're no longer anyone's tools, and we'll never force anyone to be ours. After this, we're done, said 3. You're the last person we're ever going to kill. Come on now. The two took a deep breath and spoke in Used. Farewell. Off in some far-flung region of Calvert, a horse-drawn carriage plodded along. Aside from trades, most terrestrial transportation had long since switched to orbital cars. So such an old-fashioned mode of travel was a rare sight to see. The more rustic method did have its certain undeniable charm, however. A boy drove the carriage, while a young girl of about the same age lazed about within. It makes you wonder how he got that way, the boy said, thinking back to the Emperor's face. The one that had been obscured by both cloak and helmet. His appearance had been a poor fit for his monstrous behavior. If anything, he had been rather handsome. Well, if you don't mind rumors and hearsay, I might have an answer or two for you. The girl's response came from within the carriage, delivered in her usually sleepy drawl. I'm listening. Well, the girl's story went something like this. In a small country, in some corner of the world, there once lived a vile, oppressive king. His reign was tyrannical, his rule evil, and his people lived in fear. One day he died, and his son, the crown prince, was enthroned. The prince, this new king, was at his core a kind and gentle soul who strove to govern in a fair and just manner. He was determined to avoid his father's errors, or perhaps this were because they were too accustomed to fear. No one met this new king's idea with an open mind. Free assembly and speech had already been brutally suppressed during his father's reign, and the people's rage had already been reaching a boiling point. Violent voices grew louder and louder, eventually resulting in a revolution. The Revolutionary Army launched an assault on the royal palace and forcibly converted the country into a republic, holding the new king accountable for his father's sins. Suddenly finding his life at risk, he had no choice but to flee, leaving behind his country and his entire way of life. You telling me this prince eventually became an overseer? The boy asked, his brow wrinkled with thought. As he turned the story over his head, who can say? Shrugged the girl. I don't know. If a kingdom like that even existed in the first place. Girl rolled over to continue dozing as the carriage bumped and mounted its way along the road. Assuming this is more fact than fiction, then what? The boy asked. He was too kind and lost control of his kingdom, so he developed a power desire to control others. It's hard to believe. The boy trailed off. He had no intention of giving the overseer even a shred of sympathy. Strangely enough, he did find himself feeling a little pity for the man. The boy and girl fell silent for a few moments. The only sounds that could be heard were the clopping of the horses. My thing about it is, if he's part of this organization's arcana, there's going to be other suckers. If they're going to come for revenge for what S and N did to this dude, that's what I know. This thing going to have a cliffhanger. Who's in the clinking of the carriage? The boy broke the silence. What is it? The girl raised her head from her nap. His voice remained as relaxed as ever, but the boy's tone suddenly grew tense. Is there any chance you could ever forgive me for what I did, for what happened between me and your brother? No. The girl's response was swift and blunt. The boy fell silent. He had no right to scorn her answer. Never, she continued, because he was my brother and I loved him. He was the only real family I ever had. So, the girl paused for her cheeks flushed red, and then she continued in a much louder voice. So if you want me to forgive you, you can't ever leave me. We need to stick together through thick and thin. You and me, NNS. The boy smiled, his fear a moment ago having left him. Of course, we'll always be there for each other. I have your back, you have mine. The girl could barely contain the emotion was swelling in her chest at this point. Unfortunately for her, the boy continued talking. I'll do my best to fill his shoes from now on. And that includes making sure you get the education you need to grow into the best person you can be. This was, in fact, not the answer the girl had been looking for. I'm not talking about education, she exclaimed. She started violently shaking the carriage in frustration. But what could be more important? Hey, calm down. This thing can't take too much abuse. It's rickety enough as it is. If you make it fall apart, we'll have to walk the rest of the way. No sat back down, set out fully satisfied with his response. I resolved to leave things be for the moment. The topic changed. So, any ideas? For the time being, their plan was to enter a brawl, a lemon. This is the boy initially planned, but where to from there? They had yet to give it much thought. They knew they would be pursued by any number of people for the organization. You got that right. Despite this, the two knew that as long as they stuck together, they'll find a way to manage. For the moment, they reveled in the idea of an unknown future, a new path to tread that was all their own. In any case, we'll need some kind of work, the boy said. Anything in mind? What amused a confident smile growing on his face. But we could consider our skill set. How about something in theater? Not in your life, the girl swiftly retorted. Think about it as you're a terrible actor. I'm not that bad. And I'm sure a play would be way less pressure than an assassination mission. A tad deflated, the boy sank back into his seat, but then threw out another idea, one somewhat more plausible than the last. I know, how about we become bracers? No way, the girl rejected the idea. Oh, they're a bit less bite than before. I've heard they get super busy. No sense escaping one grave just to work yourself into another. There was also this question hanging in the air over whether a bracer guild would even consider taking on people with a dual unique background. All things considered, however, it wasn't the most outlandish idea. Fine. What's your bright idea then? Me? The girl yawned. All I want to do is lay around in bed every day. Just sleep. You're ridiculous, the boy sighed. His face then lit up suddenly as he remembered something. Oh, right. What is it? Names. he said, well, they have an assignment. I just realized we haven't shared our real names with each other. Oh, right. N is short for Nadia. That's my real name. Mine's Swin. Huh, the girl said, holding a small smile. So S wasn't too far off then. Pretty crazy coincidence. Close to his coincidence, there was a good reason for her nickname for him had been so close to his real name. Her brother had mentioned it in one of his letters. She had known Swin's name before their paths even crossed, after they had worked together for a bit. She decided she wanted to call him by something that resembled his actual name, rather than his organization moniker. This, however, was something she intended to keep to herself. Well, at the end, you'll always be S to me, and I'll always be N to you, right? Yeah, you're right. Carriage continues and slow roll forward, as in a conversation. It was profound in moments, but was otherwise silly, lighthearted, and most of all, free. The boy's name was Swin, S. The girl's name was Nadia, N. Together, they were travelers discovering a newfound humanity. Thus ends the tales of S and N.